Good evening. This is the November 19th meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, chair of the CAC. Our vice chair is Naj Daniels. I'd like to thank our clerk, Amy Sayung, and our operator, Daniela Rible, for this meeting. Madam Clerk, please do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then please read your announcement about public comment.
CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure quorum. Member Bars? Bars absent. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Ford?
Ford present.
Ford present. Member Imadadeen? Imadadeen absent. Member Kim?
Kim present.
Kim present. Member Levine?
Levine present.
Levine present. Member Margarita? Margarita absent. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales present.
Milford Rosales present. Member Ortega?
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Chair Siegel?
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Member Bars is also present. Chair, we have quorum. And public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you are allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll move on to item 2, which is the chair's report. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for our last meeting of the year. We will meet next on January 28th. CAC members should have received the Executive Director's Report from yesterday's Transportation Authority Board meeting, which is also available on the agency website at www.sfcta.org. Yesterday, the SFMTA Board received a presentation on a potential local transit revenue measure where they provided feedback on 2 illustrative progressive parcel tax options, generating around $150 million per year for muni operations, which together with the potential regional measure authorized by SB 63 are needed to address the fiscal cliff facing muni and operators like BART and Caltrain. The potential measure is still being developed, and SFMTA is receiving input on topics ranging from the structure of the tax, the duration of the tax, and the desired amount of revenues. The presentation was very similar to what was presented at the second local roundtable held earlier this month, which I joined in another capacity. The presentation is on the SFMTA website at www.sfmta.com/meetings-events, and I know staff is working to agendize a SFMTA update on this topic at one of the December SFCTA board meetings. Staying on the transit theme, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC, is seeking applicants for a student youth representative to sit on its Regional Network Management Customer Advisory Group, which would provide input to the Regional Network Management Committee. This committee works to further regional goals in equity, livability, and climate resiliency through a unified regional transit system that serves all Bay Area populations. Applications are due by December 5th and can be found on MTC's website at www.mtc.ca.gov and search for Regional Network Management Customer Advisory Group. Lastly, at MTC's commission meeting this morning, they approved $1.5 million in Community Action Resource and Empowerment, or CARE, program awards. The intent of these grants is to help community-based organizations build capacity and develop partnership in the communities they serve. I'm happy to share the good news of 3 awards in San Francisco, $50,000 to Leah's Pantry for an action plan focused on walkability and older adults in Bayview, $50,000 to the South of Market Community Action Network for capacity building work related to affordable housing and transit in Soma, and $110,000 to the Filipino American Development Foundation for a streetscape and monument project on Russ Street. Notes on meeting management. CAC members, please remember to press the red star sticker on the base of the microphone to turn your microphone on, and be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks in the back of the room can hear you. Please try to limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item, at least to start, and then if we have additional time, we can always circle back. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
There's no remote public comment on this item.
Great. Then we will move on to item 3. This is nominations for the 2026 Community Advisory Committee Chair and Vice Chair. Per the CAC's bylaws, nominations for the chairperson and vice chairperson will be made at the last CAC meeting of the calendar year to be eligible for election at the first CAC meeting of the following year. There are no term limits for CAC offices. All members who are nominated and accept the nomination will need to provide Amy, the clerk of the Transportation Authority, with a brief statement of qualifications and objectives by January 21st to be included in the meeting packet for our January 28th meeting when the elections will be held. Nominations are now in order for the office of chair. Any member may nominate themselves or another member. The nomination must be accepted prior to the election. The member does not need to be present tonight to be nominated, and no seconds are required for nominations. Would anyone like to nominate themselves or another CAC member for chair? Member Levine?
I nominate Kat Siegel.
Thank you, Member Levine. I accept the nomination. Member Kim, is that your card? Yeah.
Yep. I nominate also Kat Siegel as a chair and Member Daniel as a vice chair.
Thank you, Member Kim. Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, if not, then nominations for chair are closed. Nominations are now in order for the office of vice chair. Would anyone like to nominate themselves or another CAC member for vice chair? And I think Member Kim, would you like to make a nomination for vice chair?
Yeah, I nominate Member Daniel for vice chair.
Great. Are there any further nominations? All right. Nominations are now closed. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on this item? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment?
There's no remote public comment for item 3.
Great, thank you so much. Then we will move on to our consent agenda. Items 4 through 7 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present, but is available to answer questions. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on items on the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment in the room on the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the consent agenda?
There's no remote public comment for this item.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve items 4, 5, and 6 on the consent agenda? Moved by Member Bars, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve items 4, 5, and 6 on the consent agenda, Member Bars? Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels, absent. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Imadadeen? Imadadeen, absent. Member Kim?
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita? Margarita, absent. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 7 ayes. The consent agenda is approved.
Great, thank you so much. We'll move on to item 8, adopt a motion of support to allocate $2 million and appropriate $650,000 with conditions in Prop L funds for 3 requests. And we're pleased to have Transportation Planner Erin Slichter here to present this item. Welcome, Ms. Slichter.
Thank you, Chair Siegel. Good evening, committee members. In this presentation, I'll go over requests to allocate $2 million and appropriate $650,000 in Prop L funds for 3 projects. The first request from SFCTA is for $900,000 for cable car restoration. This ongoing initiative involves multiple phases of refurbishment to ensure the cable car fleet's reliability, safety, and historical integrity. With a total of 42 cable cars in the fleet, 2 cars at a time are rotated out of service to be restored at the Woods Division facility in the Dogpatch neighborhood. Each restoration takes approximately 24 months to complete, and 2 newly restored cable cars are returned to service every 2 years. Key components of the restoration, which is done in-house by SFMTA artisans, include carpentry and metalwork to restore and reinforce car bodies, manufacturing new parts, repainting, mechanical overhauls of propulsion and braking systems, and preventative maintenance to ensure reliable operation. The requested funds will be used to restore 4 cable cars, and all cars are expected to return to service by December 28th. I will also note that the Prop L funds in this request, along with other local sources, leverage more than $5.5 million in federal funds for this project. The next request, this is from the San Francisco Department of Public Works, is for $1.1 million for tree planting and establishment. Requested funds will be used to plant approximately 407 trees in districts 9, 10, and 11, and for weekly watering as part of the establishment period to help the trees thrive. San Francisco Public Works uses tree census data to identify priority planting sites and focuses on districts with the lowest canopy coverage. Each planting involves site inspections, utility clearances, site preparation, and community outreach. And there's a list and map of priority planting locations in the materials for this item. I'll also note that while this particular request doesn't show leveraging, separately, Public Works has about $5 million budgeted for tree planting this year. That includes $2 million in City and County of San Francisco Capital Improvement Program funds for about 840 trees. Additionally, $3 million in USDA Inflation Reduction Act funds for 1,250 trees. So altogether, and including this request, the Department of Public Works is planning about 2,500 trees this year. And the third and final request in this presentation, I'm starting with a map just to give an overview of this project. This is a request from SFCTA for additional funds for the I-280 southbound Ocean Avenue off-ramp realignment project. Currently, this off-ramp is a free-flow right turn that leads to traffic merging conflicts and safety concerns for all road users. The project area has high volumes of pedestrian, bicycle, car, and transit traffic due to the Balboa Park BART station, Muni stations, and other destinations in the neighborhood. In partnership with Caltrans, SFMTA, and City College of San Francisco, this project will realign the off-ramp into a signalized intersection to reduce conflicts and improve safety. So this request is for $650,000 in Prop L funds for additional work on the design phase of this project. The design phase is nearing completion. It's at about 95% complete right now and was funded by Senate Bill 1 Local Partnership Program funds and prior sales tax allocations so far. Additional funds are needed to prepare final construction bid documents, perform utility potholing, and complete transfer of right-of-way with City College of San Francisco. Design is expected to be completed next September, and the project would be able to start construction after that once funding is secured. And I'll note that there are 2 additional items on this meeting's agenda that relate to this project or are nearby. So the next item on the agenda would be to award the design contract that would be funded by this request. And then the item following that one is for a feasibility study on the cost of implementing a multi-use path along Ocean Avenue between this off-ramp at Health Street and the Frida Kahlo and Geneva intersection. With that, I will conclude my presentation, and myself and project managers are here and can take questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ortega.
I get to go first today. So exciting. I have a question regarding the trees, and I think that this is something that's been brought up before in regards to funding with tree planting, which is we're giving money over to start tree planting and to help improve community health and wellness. But I think one of the questions that has been asked by both members of the committee and members of the audience is the maintenance of the trees like later in life. And I feel like I don't remember the answer. So I would really like to have a good understanding of A, who's responsible for the trees once they mature, and B, what will be done and how is the city choosing the plants to make sure that they don't cause other major issues that can occur with trees, such as damage to property and or cracks in the sidewalks, because I know I certainly skip over tree roots during my day.
Sure. Is it okay if I answer that? My name's David, and I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the Bureau of Urban Forestry Superintendent. And hi, I'm sitting in a vehicle right now, full disclosure. But this is what I look like in the dark, at least. My day starts at 6 a.m., and by this time I have to take care of other things, sometimes outside the office. But with me is John Sway, our acting manager for contracts and grants. And John, can you say hi?
Good evening, committee members.
John, I'm privileged to work with John, who has so many years of experience with our budgets. And we have been working with our finance team, recently strategizing our Prop L funds and our street tree planting. I'd be happy to provide some high-level information to try to answer your questions. I think that the first question was about who takes care of the trees. And I see there's a hand up, so I'll try to answer this question, then we can go to that. So when the Urban Forest Plan, which was authored and led by John and his colleagues, John, was that in 2014?
2014, 2015, yes.
Yeah, so there was a vision to plant all the available street tree planting spaces and maintain all the street trees. And in 2017, a wide margin majority of voters voted for Prop E, which funds the city and county to maintain the street trees by pruning them, as well as maintain the sidewalks beneath the trees themselves. And like any major implementation effort, it takes some time to scale up. And starting in 2018, the city started scaling up to maintain all 125,000 street trees. The goal is to prune those trees like about every 5 years. And we haven't met that interval yet. we're about 8 years in now, and we're just finishing our first round of maintaining all the trees. Now you might say, why would it take so long? Well, if the city didn't maintain these trees at all, the first round of maintenance is much more cumbersome. There's much more, there's deferred maintenance on the trees, more pruning to do per tree, more complicated pruning. And, it takes some reps to streamline logistics. So I'll say that Public Works has 19 arborist positions plus supervisors, and we do part of the work. Another part of the work is done by contractors. So we have licensed arborists and professional, tree maintenance workers working under contract underneath our supervision as well. And in tandem, we band together to maintain the street trees. So I'll pause there. I'll ask if I actually answered the question the way you hope to hear it, and give everyone an opportunity to have follow-up questions, unless you just want to go to the next question. And John, if I skipped any detail, John, please don't hesitate to interrupt me.
Hi, no, thank you. That really helped a lot. I think that we've been seeing a lot of these requests, but I don't know if I've ever had such a holistic understanding of the situation, or if I did, I need to write better notes. That really does help. I think that the other concern that was brought up before is, especially, I think that you did answer it, and I think it's just more for record at this point, but especially when large trees in older neighborhoods start to have overgrowth and hang and they start to affect property damage, I think that that's sort of where the other question is. And I guess, is there a way to make sure that information is sort of publicly available, and or where is that, so that we can, like, I can tell my neighbors and stuff if they have any concerns, contact this department at city so we can get someone to come take care of the trees?
Sure. 311 is a good place to start. And that's our intake, intake for any city service. There's going to be a whole variety of tree maintenance needs, which I'll speak to. If I can just speak to the range, and I'll try not to eat up too much time. But trees naturally grow. In a forest, they self-regulate. They're all surrounded by other trees. They protect each other from the wind. They grow straight up towards the sun because they're crowded on all sides. The branches shade each other's roots. The roots can grow and grow and grow. There's no sidewalk there. When the rain comes, it goes right into the soil. It doesn't wash down an alleyway or down the road. When the leaves fall, they decompose and become food for the trees. And if a tree falls on the ground, hey, that's just more food for the forest floor, and then it breaks down and becomes soil. So all the things that trees love in the forest, they have absolutely none of that on a sidewalk. They're not protected by other trees from the wind. They're totally isolated. When the wind comes, it blows right on the tree. When the sun beats down on the pavement, it heats up the tree. When the water falls on the ground, it wipes away on the sidewalk and the road. If a branch falls, God forbid, there's probably a car or a person underneath it. So that's a huge problem too. And you can't just let a tree fall on the ground and leave it there and let it decompose. So what we have to do is manage those trees. They do require pruning, not to shrink them into little shrinky dinks, but just so that since they're not just growing up towards the sun, they're going to grow in every direction, like out sideways, left, right, up, down. So we have to give them just structure, prune them back every 5 years. You don't need to do it every year. Some species need it a little more than others, but really 5 years is a great expectation. So if it's just a routine prune, like, hey, this tree is too big, well, that might not necessarily be a problem. It might just be like, yeah, we're going to come back every 5 years. If it's like, hey, this tree is cracked, well, is it going to wishbone in the street? Like, is the trunk cracked? Is there a risk of a branch falling down? Those are more like things that we'll respond to 24 hours a day. So if you're having a tree emergency, God forbid, call 311 and we'll send out a crew 24 hours a day. If it's a non-emergency or it's some other need, our inspection staff will inspect it and they will determine the priority for when it's going to get maintenance. So trees they're part of a human-made landscape with concrete, vehicles, houses, bus stops, all that stuff. We do try to clear them up high enough so that vehicles can pass underneath and people without getting poked. There's going to be, leaves that fall from them, seeds that fall from them, other things that it's just part of being a tree that we can't control. So We acknowledge that, trees can somewhat be messy in the way that they drop leaves or sticks or seeds. But a world without them, like if you look at the photos of San Francisco in like the 1940s or earlier, it's kind of scary. So we have to acknowledge the management needs, do our best to keep up with it, and do our best to make sure those trees live a long, healthy life and are free of hazards.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Happy to answer follow-up questions if I missed something, and I see there's still a hand up. I think there's a question about the sidewalks. Want me to go there?
I'm good to see. Thank you so much for the detailed explanation.
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I think we'll move on to other member questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Member Milford Rosales.
Hello. I have questions both about the design of the particular turn lane onto Ocean Avenue and the signal at that intersection. Would this be an appropriate item, or should I wait for one of the next two items to bring those up?
I think if you have specific questions about the design of the turn lane, that probably would be the right place. And then for questions about the bike lane, that would be a subsequent.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask about the turn lane here and wait for the next part. A significant part of the reason I got involved and applied to join this body was when family was hit by an SUV in a double turn lane on a highway ramp across the street from my apartment. When we had originally first seen this, like over a year ago, there was the potential for a double turn lane there, but it wasn't really mentioned as whether it would be concrete or not. And that was the turn lane that I'm remembering was signalized double turn lane. This will be a signalized one as well. Is there a strong justification for increasing this from single lane to double turn, given that it's right between a BART station and arguably three large schools, that it's going to have a high volume? I'm thinking, CCSF, local Merding, and elementary school around there too. Okay, and I'm very confused why we'd be doing this, because after that incident at 4th and King, we had a commitment from the mayor at the time to get rid of all the double turn lanes in the city. And we're adding another one here between a transit station and two schools that's full of pedestrians at many hours of the day.
Thank you for that question. Carl Holmes, Deputy Director of Capital Projects. We are aware of turn for a double lane for right turn. However, in this particular location, there is not, it's an intersection that only has one action, which is the turn, the right turn. So there is no ability to make a left turn or to drive straight through. So right turn is the only action. And so, is that good? Okay. So this location, the only action that a vehicle can take is the right turn. And so, and that it is signalized, and I heard you say that the previous location was signalized, but this is the only action that a vehicle can take. And we are also making sure that there's protection between vehicle and the light rail that's on Ocean Avenue. So we've looked at that and the protections for pedestrians and bicyclists. So we do believe this is still a good scenario to proceed on.
I'm not sure if I quite understand why this being the right turn being the only possible action makes it safer and not. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Oh, okay. So there is no ability to cross as a pedestrian, to cross perpendicular to Ocean Avenue. So there wouldn't be that potential for a vehicle to turn right and to hit pedestrian that is crossing Ocean Avenue. The action for a pedestrian would be to, at that signalized intersection, to cross in front of the intersection, but you wouldn't have that right turn, vehicle making a right turn, running into a person that is trying to cross Ocean Avenue. I'm not sure if that is the scenario that you described previously, but we wouldn't have that potential there because there is no crossing of Ocean Avenue by a pedestrian at that location.
All right, thanks for that clarification. The hands were very helpful for me. What I was thinking of was an incident in which the car in the innermost lane was waiting for a pedestrian to cross on the parallel crosswalk. So a car in the leftmost lane that could not see just turned right into a whole family there. So kind of understanding that, I can see how this is safer, but I still am not very excited about it.
Next, one of the next items. Hopefully, you'll see an exhibit. It might be the same exhibit that was shown previously, but we could amplify that for you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Member Kim?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about tree planting. It's about the sidewalk. We have, I saw here CTA, we approved some multiple funds to implement trees, but we don't see the fund for repair damaged sidewalk, especially sidewalk damaged by tree. So I have a question, Public Works. How many backlog to damaging the sidewalk to be repaired?
So the question is, what's our backlog of trees damaged by sidewalks?
Correct.
Okay. Well, if I want to help, if everyone can visualize, a sidewalk that is lifted by a half an inch would be considered sidewalk damage. So anything that constitutes a half-inch lift in sidewalk could be sidewalk damage. We have, I would estimate, out of our 125,000 trees, probably 10% of them, which would be like 12,000, may have a reported sidewalk lift of some sort. But there's a good solution to that, and we're working on it. So I'd like to speak to that. You don't have to remove the entire sidewalk just because it's lifted by a half inch or even an inch or maybe up to 2 inches. There's a process called shaving it, and we deploy in the range of $4 million a year worth of contracting money. And if I'm wrong on that, John, please correct me, to have sidewalks shaved, which means if you have to replace a sidewalk, it's like 3 or 4 inches thick. You have to jackhammer it, haul it out, and throw it in a dump, which is just a lot of environmental costs. Shaving it, you just shave off the top and you leave the whole sidewalk in place. And that is really effective. It happens a lot faster, and it happens, block by block. Like we'll go through an entire neighborhood and do it. And you get a lot more lifespan out of the sidewalk. It does less damage to the trees. And right now, John and I are working on a contract to create a citywide sidewalk evaluation for every tree in our streets, so that now the contract has not been issued yet, but that's what we're working on. Is like we want to have a holistic view of all of our sidewalks and not just the ones that have been reported or that we find anecdotally, because we want to evaluate all the sidewalks. And if we can get this contract out soon, like we're looking in the next 12, 18 months to have those types of results. John, anything else anything you want to correct me on for those details?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And the other thing I would say is we probably have a sidewalk cement shop superintendent at the Bureau of Urban Forestry, and she wasn't able to be here tonight. We could check in with her if you wanted an exact number of sites in the backlog and provide that to the TA staff to share. But our sidewalk repair program is a combination of sidewalk shaving, as David mentioned. That's a much more nimble, quicker way. And we have an active contract where we're doing thousands of sites with that. And then sites that can't be shaved get into our queue for full repair and replace. And so that is something that we could provide some more information on if on the data for that.
Thank you for answer. Yeah. Right now, I'm one of the merchant association, Gary. So we have in-person survey with Public Works. So like 14 Avenue to 28, we report around 50 spots. And then, yeah, I saw like 3 blocks you guys are working on, shaped it. But as you said, like around below like 2-inch lifted, shaving working, but more than 3 inches, the shaving doesn't work. Still, the sidewalk is kind of a hill, up and down, up and down. So it's really bad shape. So I want to emphasize all those around 12,000, damaged sidewalk. Probably you need to prioritize, especially merchant corridor. The merchant corridor means there are a lot of foot traffic, and also there's transit. Around the bus shelter, sidewalk is really horrible. So I reported it to MTA project team. We have a Gary improvement team. So separately. So next year they're gonna fix some sidewalk around the bus shelter, but excluding that, there's like over 30 and 40 sidewalks really damaged. So as you mentioned, like it takes 12 to 18 months. You can handle all of them. It's really optimistic, but I suggest it probably this is about the budget issue. So I never see here sidewalk repair funding request, especially damaged by trees. So please more proactively approach finding funding source. So, repair those sidewalk as soon as possible, especially, business corridor. We have a lot of foot traffic, seniors and families with kids.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for saying that. And I want to maybe clarify and also answer. We expect the evaluation for citywide for sidewalks underneath street trees to be completed within that estimated time frame. That doesn't mean that we're going to fix all the sidewalks by then. The sidewalk, addressing lifted sidewalks, that's just going to be a perpetual duty as the earth shifts, tree roots shift. We're going to have to prioritize based off the data we get and then just continue on an ongoing basis, catch up with the backlog and then stay on top of it, perpetually moving forward. But to talk about the specific request you have, we do prioritize commercial corridors as well as schools and areas where like children or the elderly may congregate, for the sake of risk management.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for, hopefully you prioritize those areas. You really got a point, especially my neighborhood has everything, business, school, senior center, religious place, but around that area really severely damaged the sidewalk. So I reported multiple times, but yeah, I couldn't hear any plan. So
Yes.
hopefully later on, please provide, those backlog, and then if you have plan, and then please provide, which area you guys repair first.
Yes, we will. Yeah, and I'm only been in my position for about 6 months, so some of the details I'm still coming up to speed on when it comes to our capacity and our, our implementation schedule. We do have a GIS system that shows all the places we've deployed sidewalk shaving to date, right, John? Yeah, so that's good. And right now we're working with our contractor to see how we can scale up. We have limitations in the size of contracts that can be issued. You know, the bidding process is quite a process. There's limitations to staff to manage contractors and just in-house staff. We're in like a hiring freeze. So we're trying to navigate those limitations and constraints and seeing where we can maximize our output, because this is a basic quality of life issue that affects all San Franciscans and our visitors, and it just makes our streets safer and better for everybody. So we see that this is a universally good thing that we want to bring far and wide to all of our residents.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Bars?
Thank you, Member Ford, for letting me use your microphone. You don't want to ask your question? All right. So I would also like to ask a couple of questions of Director Holmes about the southbound realignment item that's in District 7. Thank you. So this, I know there's two items on this. This one is for the turn lane. Is that right? Am I understanding that? The design of the turn lane, is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
It would be really helpful to me. Did you capture what the current volume of vehicles using that lane is at any point in the day?
I'll rely on Yana Waldman to come to the mic.
I'm not going to be able to give you a number. Oh, sorry. Am I working now? I think so. Yana Waldman, Capital Projects. Carl. I can't give you the exact number right now, but we can provide it. We have a very detailed traffic analysis report that goes through various iterations of starting back in 2015 now and projected up to, I believe, 2040. So we can share that with you. I wanted to let you know we have it, but I don't have the number.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That would be welcome. I will offer to my colleagues that this is in District 7, this project, which is in my district. And I drive here, I walk here, I have ridden a bike along that bit of ocean. I don't recommend it. I can see why we want to fix it. My impression of when I drive on the southbound ramp is that there's very often few other vehicles with me. It's not very well used, and in my lived experience. But I probably am also missing some of the peak times where I might imagine there's a lot of traffic going to City College there. And so I will just offer that, like, while I see the problems around the pedestrian conflicts, I see the problem around that bike lane full show, I'm having a really hard time with a project that's essentially $20 million to move a freeway to make more space for cars that I don't share space with when I drive there. So, and I know this project's been in the works for a real long time because I read the memo, and I think it dates back to like 2013 or 2014. But could you just take me back to what other design options were on the table when we landed at moving the freeway alignment? What other things were considered?
Getting used to the mics. There was a lot of recommendations that came out of the Balboa Park circulation study. That was the original study that this project grew from. And there were considerations looking at a left turn. There were other iterations looking at a right turn. The reason for the widening is not to increase capacity of that turn. It is because providing the crossing, the safe crossing, necessitates a signal. And once you have a signal, you end up with a red light that will, for some period of time, I believe it's 90 seconds in the current design. And so that makes the cars back up, where right now they have free flow. And so the storage of the cars is why the area is widening, not to increase capacity of the off-ramp. the capacity is not changed. It's primarily to provide that safety and pedestrians crossing at that area, which we've all heard is quite dangerous right now.
And why can't you just put, like, why do you have to, what's the math that says you need the capacity?
So the data, when you look at holding that travel pattern for the 90 seconds, is based on the travel, the demand for that off-ramp. The cars will stack up and queue into the main line of the I-280, the south-westbound lanes, and that is extremely dangerous, right? You don't want to have stopped cars on the freeway. I mean, it's based on current data, but also projected out to, I believe, 2040. Once again, we can share the complete traffic analysis.
Thank you. I'll also say that you recall my moment in glory at the CAC a couple of years ago. We presented the northbound Geneva study, and so I will never forget it. Some of you also won't forget it. But that was to avoid or to mitigate the queuing that was happening onto the main line. And so we don't want to have a similar scenario where with having a signalized intersection or signalized off-ramp, we create a situation where vehicles start queuing up onto the main line, and then we do another study, and then me or someone else comes before you with a similar scenario. So the idea is to have that storage capacity to allow for vehicles to not be stopped on the main line.
Please, Member Ortega.
I just want to add in, I feel like one of the things I remember is there's something actually related to Caltrans on the highway. Like part of the reason that we weren't allowed to have one lane is something to do with like Caltrans. It wasn't like the city, but I don't know. Can you speak to that? I guess I'm asking because I feel like the highway isn't like city, right? It's federal. So there's some regulatory body that isn't us that has the highway, and they had a lot of concern about the backup. Am I misremembering that? Because I think that might be part of what you're asking, and I feel like I remember there was like Caltrans or some other federal body that was part of the conversation. Maybe I'm misremembering one of our meetings.
So I'm not sure how to. Chair is open. Getting my workout in. I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to specifically, Member Ortega, but you're correct in the sense that Caltrans does have jurisdiction over the highway, and they also had expressed concerns about not having storage capacity at a signalized off-ramp, and then again going back to having cars queuing up onto the highway, onto the main line, creating high probability for rear-end collisions. So that's, I mean, it is a high trafficked area between Ocean Avenue and Geneva. I don't have the numbers, but we can do a follow-up on that. But the idea, we don't consider it a widening, even though we use that, you heard that word. It's really providing capacity for storage due to that signalized off-ramp.
Chair, can I ask another? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll just say that given the views that I espoused in that unforgettable presentation and discussion about the northbound ramps, I would have to say I'm not inclined for this. It feels to me like a project from another time, and I struggle. I believe that you have the traffic analysis, but I struggle to jump to the leap that the widening and the capacity is needed without those projections in front of me, because I can't see what the assumptions. but I appreciate that. I appreciate that it isn't about creating capacity; it's about creating storage. So I get that. I think the other piece of this that is kind of like nagging at me is there we didn't see any other options for how we slow vehicles safely off the highway. And this was a theme in that last presentation as well, like what techniques do exist. And it's actually something that's followed me around as I've traveled to other places. And like I've noticed like different approaches to metering lights I've seen, not here, not in California, but like in other states and in other countries, different approaches to timing of signals. So like I heard you say 90 seconds. I don't know if 90 seconds is a best practice or a rule, but that's not true everywhere. And you know, we haven't talked about that topic since you came, so it's been a little bit. It's been something I've been thinking about and watching, but it feels like the option you're presenting here is widen this off ramp, frankly, to make room for a bike lane that I still won't use because of the volume on Ocean Avenue, and spend in the process 4% of our $500 million for streets and highways funding in our sales tax measure. And that to me just feels like in a world of fiscal austerity, it feels like a bit of a tall order. So I just thought I would say that very plainly and see if you have a response to that.
I'll say thank you for that feedback. We had very positive outreach feedback, so I guess a wish that I will state is that we could have reached out to you individually to get your feedback prior to the meeting, but there is not that mechanism. So, so I'm surprised. And even at my moment of glory, we mentioned that we were working on this design, and we were told that's great. People were excited about it. But either way, I accept your feedback. But it is surprising, given that the amount of feedback that we got, where people are appreciative of this and saw it as an improvement. So, but part of this is accepting all feedback.
Member Margarita.
Thank you for your presentation, and I'm sorry I'm late. Bear with me because I'm in about 3 hours of sleep. But I read through the documents, and so I'm a little surprised by some of the comments. It's talking about the safety that it's providing for the pedestrians and everything. I just kind of wanted to say that. And also, it's coupled with the tree planting project. It's really good for the environment, right? And this is bettering our environment. And I know as humans, we think we're superior to the rest of the world. And I always think about the who doesn't have a voice? Children, elderly, our environment, our land, trees, birds, animals, and all of that. So again, going back to narcissistic ways of thinking for humans, that we think we're above everything, but it's really good for us to have trees in communities and birds. Even just having humans listen to birds is good for us, for me, for you, for everyone. And so I think we just really need to look at what's being proposed and looking at how the work that has been posed into it. I really appreciated all of the answers to the questions, and I appreciate the questions as well. I think this is a good thing, and there's been some community feedback and environmental justice communities that have been included in having these decisions made, right, and their input. So I think that we, as community members, need to think about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any other questions or comments before we go to public comment? Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Edward Mason, regarding the urban forestry plan, my comments are in the vein of being constructive comments for the future. I consider this request as incomplete staff work because we did not identify the backlog that's currently ongoing. I would expect to have seen how many trips and fall claims the city attorney has paid within the last year or 10 years since this urban forestry plan's been underway. I think you've all received my message and photos of the situation that we have in the neighborhood. This is just a sprinkling of the volume of damage that we experience there. It's been going on for years with the damage and no corrective action. And now, finally, at the back of Whole Foods, you know, that's a whole nother fiasco that's going on. So it's, you don't see the Friends of the Urban Forest here advocating for maintenance money. They just want to plant trees. People, you have to realize in logistics, it's called an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is the trees. The bottom of the iceberg is all the maintenance that goes on and all the elements of logistics that go into that. So, and if we don't have enough funding, all we're doing is by approving this project now, you're creating the maintenance problem 10 years from now. So I say, put a stop on it, hold off until you can complete the backlog remediation before we go and spend any more money on the future. So I realize they're important and all that, yes, but I have a friend that has a broken wrist now as a result of this, of being trips and falls. So that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any other public comment in the room? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one remote public comment. Griffin, go ahead. Let's see.
Thanks, CAC Committee, Griffin Lee, Connected SF staff. I'm actually going to agree with the gentleman that just spoke. The idea of planting more trees sounds lovely to beautify our sidewalks and streets, but the reality is I hear from many members of Connected SF throughout the city is that in their respective neighborhoods, the trees that are owned or that have oversight from the city are not maintained. Trimming trees every 5 years, I think one of the public works presenters stated, that seems like a long time to wait to trim a tree. I say we show more responsibility with what we have and gain the trust of the public that you can actually maintain with what we got and then add on. As I state what I just mentioned, I'm also sort of surprised. Why are we talking about trees when this is a transportation meeting and transportation committee? And how does Public Works get allocation of Prop L funds? I haven't read the full text of Prop L from 2022, but it's highly questionable why DPW is getting funds from Prop L. Lastly, regarding the cable car efforts, cable car topic, super supportive of keeping cable cars. They're an iconic tourist tourist destination and visitor attraction. But the reality is, I think if this committee wants to be held as responsible as an advisory committee, let's start urging SFMTA to think about obligate or redistributing the responsibility and oversight of cable cars to a private entity. Thanks so much.
Thank you, caller, for your comment. There is no further remote public comment for this item.
Great, thank you so much. Member Levine, yep.
Point of information, can we separate out any of these items? I would want to, if possible, separate out the tree planting issue from the others, if whatever process we need to take.
So I believe, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, that you can make a motion to sever the item first, or you can make a motion on like all of the items besides that. Maybe Maria, do you want to explain?
Even easier, Chair. If you wish, you can sever the item without any action required. We'll just take a vote on however you divvy it up. There are 3 total requests.
So maybe, Member Levine, would you like us to sever the tree item and vote on
I'd like to move to sever the tree planting issue from the other 2.
And Member Bars?
Sorry, Member Ford. We're really being close friends, much like our districts abut one another. I was going to ask to sever the southbound ramp one.
Okay. Yes, Member Ford?
Right. Our public commenter did ask the question I did not ask, which was the point of order about Prop L funds, transportation funds being used for tree planting, and whether that is the street budget, the transportation budget, or the paratransit budget. I mean, the transit budget, paratransit, streets, planning. Which of these buckets of Prop L funds does B fall into?
Is staff able to answer that?
Well, Anna comes up. There is a specific line item for tree planting for Public Works in the expenditure plan.
All right, so let's vote on each of these items separately. So I guess let's do the, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, is it possible, is it within the rules for me to make a comment before we vote? And the reason why I want to make a comment is because the items have been severed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the comment that I wanted to make is not to the staff, but it's to my colleagues on this body. I'm here as a representative of District 10. It is suffering. My district has a Superfund site where the Navy is constantly expending like open air toxins as of most recently of 2 months ago. So anything that we can do to help clean the air. I live in a cancer cluster. Since the day that I've been born, I've lived in San Francisco for 47 years. It is totally unfair to me in the district that I live in, which we know the reasons why. So I'm asking you to consider that and look at how many trees are being planted in my district. And I just want you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All right. Let us take a vote first. Can I get a motion? Oh, no. Oh, Member Bars, did you want to say something else? Can I get a motion and a second on the cable car item specifically? Moved by Member Milford Rosales, seconded by Member Ortega. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve $900,000 in Prop L funds for SFMTA's cable car restoration project, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels?
Aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Imadadeen? Imadadeen, absent. Member Kim?
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. Chair, there are 9 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great. Can I get a motion and a second on the street tree planting item? Moved by Vice Chair Daniels. Seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve $1,100,000 in Prop L funds for SFPW's tree planting and establishment project, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels?
Aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Imadadeen? Imadadeen, absent. Member Kim?
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine?
Levine abstain.
Levine, abstain. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. Chair, there are 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
If I may, Chair
Yeah.
Siegel, Deputy Director Holmes, I think with Yana's help, has secured just a couple of stats on the volume, if that is helpful prior to the vote.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Thank you, Yana. So the numbers are for AM peak period 703 vehicles per hour, and for the PM peak 666 vehicles per hour.
Thank you so much. Member Bars, do you have a comment or question?
Don't have a comment. I just was trying to use a calculator really quickly because I think you said a holding time of 90 seconds. And I wanted to do the math. 3 minutes in an hour. 60, 360, 36. 40, that's what I was. Vehicles per life cycle. This is going to say so 17 times 20, and what's there right now?
Sorry, yeah. So if it was 11 to 12 vehicles per minute, and you're queued there for a minute and a half, so it would be 18-ish vehicles. I'm ballparking a little bit here. What you do have to remember is there might not be a flat grade of vehicles through that hour. I'm not a traffic specialist, so definitely we should get someone to provide you more granularity. But you're looking at 18 vehicles. That is a significant amount of vehicles for a ramp, and so that's how it was sized. We will provide this document that has more detail. It's just hard to read through it on the fly here. But the size of the pocket, or the turn pocket, the off-ramp, was developed to hold this amount of vehicles. I will try to get the 2040 ones as I can find.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Member Bars, okay. Can I get a motion and a second on the I-280 off-ramp realignment? Moved by Member Kim. Seconded by Member Margarita. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve $650,000 in Prop L funds for Transportation Authority's I-280 southbound Ocean Avenue off-ramp realignment project, Member Bors?
Bors abstain.
Bors abstain. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Imadadeen? Imadadeen absent. Member Kim?
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales abstain.
Milford Rosales abstain. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 7 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for the presentation and to all the project managers. We'll move on to item 9, adopt a motion of support to increase the amount of professional services contract with Mark Thomas and Company by $300,000 for the design phase of the I-280 Ocean Avenue off-ramp project. I believe we have Jana Waldman. Yes, we have a presentation from Jana Waldman with SFCTA's Capital Projects Division. Welcome back.
Thank you for the help. First, Waldman. I'm really bad at this. So, but is it good now?
Yeah. You just
Okay, great. Thank you guys for bearing with me. You're going to have to bear with me a lot because I'm going to do the next 2 items. Thank you for having me. I will on to the next item. Thank you, Anna. This is the graphic we were looking at previously. And I know we've discussed this item a bit, but the southbound off-ramp project aims to improve safety along Ocean Avenue. As we noted, the project is to realign the off-ramp to prevent the free-flowing right turn from merging onto Ocean, to signalize it, which would reduce merging conflicts with traffic and pedestrians on Ocean Avenue. Now, as mentioned in the prior item, the project area supports a high volume of pedestrian traffic due to its proximity to Balboa Park, BART, and Muni Station, City College of San Francisco, and destinations in the vicinity of Balboa Park neighborhoods such as Lick Wilmerdine High School, Balboa Park, and neighborhood retail along Ocean Avenue to the west. The project scope consists of adding a traffic signal and bike lane, as we've discussed. The project also includes widening the sidewalk adjacent to the City College in order to accommodate both pedestrians and potential future bicyclists. And the off-ramp is being widened, as we've discussed, from 1 lane to 2 in order to accommodate the backup of the cars that result from the new signal on Ocean Avenue. This will not increase the capacity. It is just to prevent the backup. There we go. So sorry about that. I am struggling with that. Mark Thomas and Company was awarded a professional service contract in 2022 for $1.85 million. And then this was amended in July of 2025 to add community outreach for $54,000, $250 as well. And then the designs for that work were completed last summer, and we are now seeking a $300,000 amendment contingent on the prior item. The scope that the consultants would complete includes responding to Caltrans and city comments to prepare final bid documents and encroachment permits for construction, utility coordination, which is extensive in a congested city street like Ocean Avenue. There's also quite a bit of complicated right-of-way acquisition along City College, so this will fund that. And then construction cost estimating and a funding strategy, which is key to moving on to the construction phase. So what we're asking for today is to amend the Mark Thomas contract by $300,000 to complete that design. That will, of course, complete the documents as noted previously during the 2026 year, and this is contingent on the prior item at board. And with that, I'm happy to dive into more questions.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ortega.
Hi. So I actually have a question about the money that was amended in July 2025, because I guess my question is, why wasn't community outreach included in the original scope, and why did it cost an extra $54,000 to talk to the community when that should have been included in the scope? I just don't understand the history here, so if I could get any explanation on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and Carl can add to it. Community outreach was performed extensively for this project as part of the environmental phase, which happened prior to the design phase, which we are currently in. PAED is the process, project approvals and environmental, and we usually do a huge amount of outreach, and the traffic analysis is also part of that phase, what I was referring back to previously. The reason we added more outreach now was because of the time that had passed, but also there was a large amount of interest in the bike lane safety in that area, as I think has come up in previous meetings here. We talked about the outreach, I believe, in the June meeting. And so that's why it was added onto the design phase, even though it had previously been done during environmental.
And can you just tell me when the environmental study was originally performed?
The environmental was done between 2015 and 2019.
So basically it was done before the pandemic, and you wanted to get updates post-pandemic.
And you will see there is actually, under the next item, a look into more traffic analysis as well to also refresh.
Okay, the next item is a refresh.
The next item is to do a adjacent bike lane, item 10, a feasibility study, but as part of that, we will be looking into additional traffic analysis, which is partially in response to getting refreshed numbers.
Okay, and so then what is this $300,000 is to finalize the design of something that you want new numbers for? Sorry, I'm just, you have 3 different items. I'm trying to put them all together in my head. What, you have a item after this to do an updated study after we've done updated community feedback. And so my question is, the amendment scope and budget that you're asking for $300,000 for list project management, that makes sense. You need the contractor to manage the project. Final bid documents and encroachment permits, utility coordination and potholing, additional easement and right-of-way acquisition, and construction cost and funding strategy. My question is, if you're going to take a look back, why will you have final bid documents? If I understood correctly, and maybe I don't, and that's totally fine. It's been an off week for me. My comprehension can be very low sometimes.
Yeah, so the next item is to do a segment that is adjacent to the piece we are looking at currently. And I will pull up a map. Maybe I can do that now, but I wanted to get into the item. But I will describe that it is adjacent. So if we can start on the piece of work next to it, it enables us to better utilize the segment of path that is in design phase now, but we need to study the piece next to it in order to move forward with that.
Oh, I think I misunderstood something that you said. I thought that the next piece was adjacent, and then when you mentioned it, I thought that you were saying, no, it's on top of this. And I was like, I'm so confused. Why would we approve money for final permits if you're going to look at it again? Because that doesn't make sense. Okay, so basically, this is to have the final bid permits for the design that we've been talking about that includes all of the stuff. And, okay, and so $300,000 amendment is to basically get all of that taken care of as they prepare the final bid documents. And just so that like I said, it's been an off week. So just so that I understand this correctly, one of the things is the reason that this is an amendment is because it has incorporated more community feedback, or why? I'm trying to understand why it's an amendment to the scope, because again, I feel like this is the design phase. You had this project going on for a really long time. So why are we amending it for $300,000 instead of it, again, being part of the scope? I'm just trying to make sure I really understand that before I sit here and say, yeah, like, I get that the contractor needs to do this work. I don't want to argue about why does the contractor need to give you final permitting. That absolutely needs to happen. Get that part. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this.
It's a really great question. Our prior funding for this item was to complete 100% design, and bear with me, these terms can be confusing. We submitted 100% design in June to Caltrans and to city departments for review. There is a phase after 100% design, and I apologize if that is confusing, that is termed final design or bid documents, where you pick up those comments on the 100% package and you incorporate, you finalize the designs, you do some cleanup at the end, and you prepare final specifications to use for advertisement, and you also do bid quantities. There's generally a refresh of the cost estimate, one of the items that I noted there. So most of this is doing final cleanup and preparing it for bidding, and that has always been planned. Our prior funding got us to 100% design, and so therefore our design contract with our contractor was only to 100%. Now we are building on that to add in the final funding, and then in parallel the final contract work for the. And I apologize; those terms are confusing.
Like I said, could have been an off week for me too. Don't worry. I asked you guys lots of questions. I'm sure you've answered 50 times from me. But I appreciate you answering it one more, because that really helped, and I do hope that that helps some of my other committee members here who may have also been asking the same question I was, which is, why wasn't that already included in the scope of work? And the answer is, because that wasn't the original scope of work. Great. I understand now. I think I'm good. Everyone else can ask you the other fun questions.
Member Bars.
Thank you. I love following Member Ortega. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so I think I have another question, which is actually more about how do these things go together than about like any of the spirit of the design or the project itself. So this is an amendment to the scope, and it achieves getting us to bid documents and also paying for a little bit more outreach to essentially refresh. Is that right? No, okay.
Apologies. Yes to the first thing you said.
Yes.
It is to get final bid documents. The outreach was noted as a prior contract amendment that was paid for with previous funding. The current funding request from item 8, and then this contract amendment request, item 9, is just for the bid documents. The outreach was just a bullet of something that happened in the past. But we did gain a lot from that.
Yeah, and so another way to phrase it is the item 8 was providing the approval for additional funding for this project. Item 9 provides for us to specifically amend the contract with the designer to take the design from 100% design to bid document. And then item 10, which you'll hear about in a moment or a few moments, is to go adjacent to this off-ramp and to study for a potential multi-use path, which is why we had the sidewalk and the off-ramp section limits of work to be wide enough to potentially accommodate future bicyclists. And that's been a result of the collaboration we have with MTA. So they were actually asking us to take that on, which is item 10. That's how the 3 items are related.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that explanation. That was super helpful. Thank you. So that addresses my question, and I will return to the fun questions part with item 10. Thank you.
Member Margarita?
I can yield. I think that you guys said everything. But I guess I'll just comment. Didn't we, our board or community advisory members, didn't we have something to do with asking our team to go back and ask the community for input back when we talked about this? And so that's why you guys went back and asked the community, including the bicyclists, to give you feedback. But now we're questioning, why did you do that? So I just wanted to remind us all that we had something to do with that input. Thank you.
And it was you specifically that brought it up. Thank you.
Excellent. Are there any other questions or comments from members before we go to public comment? Member Bars?
This is not a question as much as a fact that I checked. So according to Google Maps, the off-ramp is approximately 619 feet long. So that's what's there today, is 619 feet, according to mapping, common consumer mapping software. I don't know how specific that is, which would, of course, in theory, account for at least the volume today. But I just wanted to state that as on the record.
I do want to comment on that. It is a shared off-ramp. So there are actually, so if you look at the off-ramp, it comes off of the I-280 and then it splits, and one lane goes to our project that we are discussing and one continues under. So I just want to note that the length is not necessarily just for the vehicles in this arm of the Y, let's say.
What I measured, it is actually just the length of the Y. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not looking at it specifically, so thank you.
All right, let's go to public comment. Is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There's no remote public comment for item 9.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 9? Moved by Member Bars. Seconded by Member Margarita. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 9, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels, aye. Daniels, aye. Member Ford.
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Imadadeen. Imadadeen absent. Member Kim.
Kim, aye.
Kim, I. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, I. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, I. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, I. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, I. Chair Siegel?
Eagle eye.
Siegel, I. There are 9 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, and we'll move on to the related item 10. This is to adopt a motion of support to amend the Prop K grant agreement for the Ocean Avenue safety and bike access to allow funds held in reserve for implementation of the mobility action plan to be used for the multi-use path feasibility study. And we have Ms. Waldman here again to present this item. Thank you for bearing with us.
Okay, good evening again, Chair and members. Anna Waldman again. Okay, so this item is actually my favorite of the 3. The Ocean Avenue multi-use path feasibility study. In March of 2023, the board allocated $237,000 in NTP funds to SFMTA for implementation of pedestrian safety, bike access, and other upgrades along the Ocean Avenue corridor through the Ocean Avenue Mobility Action Plan. Because of the relatively small scale and straightforward nature of the improvements, SFMTA was able to implement those recommendations as part of the Frida Kahlo Way Quick Build and Muni Forward projects, which were funded by previously allocated sales tax and TNC tax funds and did not need to draw upon the $237,000 that we are discussing now. Action Plan also recommended further analysis of the bike path along Ocean Avenue between the I-280 southbound ramps, where we were just discussing, and the Frida Kahlo Ocean Geneva intersection. You'll sometimes hear that referred to the fog intersection, but I will try not to do that. With SFMTA support, we are requesting an amendment of the Prop K grant agreement to use the reserve funds for further planning and engineering analysis of the feasibility of the multi-use path on Ocean Avenue. The proposed segment of path will connect the new pathway east of House Street from the prior item with the existing bike infrastructure along Frida Kahlo Way, which is where City College is. Widening of the sidewalk into a multi-use pathway will necessitate reconstruction of the existing retaining wall and potential removal of the pedestrian overcrossing at this location. And you will see some of those items here on that map for visual orientation. Ocean Avenue multi-use path feasibility study will look at the technical feasibility of improving the bicycle and pedestrian access along Ocean between House and Frida Kahlo Way. It will consider the existing infrastructure challenges, which are primarily a large retaining wall and overcrossing, shown on the prior map, and would determine a rough order of magnitude cost associated with the work, and develop a high-level funding plan. And you can see some of those items listed, or breakdown of those items listed here. And as noted in some of the previous discussion, outreach related to this topic was discussed significantly in May and June when we conducted outreach for the related project. This piece of work was highly desired by the community pretty much across the board, and also MTA. Excited about that. So our request today is to amend the Prop K standard agreement to allow the $237,000 to be used for the Ocean Avenue multi-use path feasibility study, which was a recommendation in the same Ocean Avenue mobility study as the original funding was for. And we will come back to the CAC midway through the project to report on findings and seek feedback. And then we will also come back to the board for final approval of our recommendation at the conclusion of the study. So with that, again, happy questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Vice Chair Daniels.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious, and my question will probably reveal where my curiosity is coming from. But you talked about the community being very excited about the project, but I'm wondering, was there any community pushback when you explained the possibility of losing the pedestrian bridge and then having pedestrians be forced to use the multi-use pathway? Were there any pedestrians that were concerned about the loss?
During that portion of outreach, we were talking about the widening of the path and providing safety for the bicyclists along Ocean. The removal of the path of the crossing was from a prior study, the Ocean Avenue Mobility Action. It is not necessarily something that would happen. It was a potential outcome of needing to relocate the wall. This feasibility study will look into whether it needs to come down in order to move the wall. We don't know that now. That's what the study will help us determine. If it does need to come down, we will look at the traffic impacts of that, and that's why there is traffic analysis as part of that, looking at both pedestrian and vehicular traffic impacts. So we will do more outreach as well as part of that. Like this outreach from the prior project will continue.
Chair, can I actually answer Vice Chair Daniels' question? Because I served on the Ocean Avenue Mobility Task Force prior to joining the CAC. And we actually talked during that task force extensively about that pedestrian bridge because that is not a very well-loved piece of infrastructure in my neighborhood. Like, just being quite honest with you, it's not very well used. It's not ADA, it's not like accessible. So if you want to get to like the Muni boarding islands and you are on a wheelchair, you can't use that. It's not like, it's kind of an eyesore. Like, it was generally seen as kind of a win for that to come down. I'll just, like, in the task force. Can't speak for everybody, but that was like my honest impression of feel about that. So just as FYI, that was discussed at length in the task force.
I appreciate you sharing that, and I also appreciate your response. But again, I'm just concerned about pedestrians. We do a lot of focusing on bicyclists. We do a lot of work on making sure that bikes who do not contribute to any of the revenue in the city get everything that they want. And I want to make sure that pedestrians are not being forgotten about, although most of the time I'm speaking up because I drive. But I want to also be concerned about my niece and nephews who are walking the streets throughout their young life.
Member Bars.
Thank you. So I wanted to go back to the multi-use path, and I just want to make sure I understand. Like, this path would go from house to Frida Kahlo Way, right? Is that right?
Right. This path under this item would go from house to Frida Kahlo Way.
So there's a little bit of a gap between where the off ramp is and that, like, a little. It's truly a small gap, but like, what is going on with the bike facility right at the off ramp? And crossing the highway.
Right. So under the previous item, the adjacent project, there is a widened path. That path was considered as a multi-use path, so it's sidewalk for pedestrian use, and the bicycles are currently on the street because it was considered unsafe and unnatural for bicycles to cross at the off-ramp, go onto the sidewalk for a short duration, as you pointed out, it's a short-ish gap, and then have to be forced back out onto Ocean Avenue in a very narrow space and be sharing the road with buses and other vehicles. So this item 10, allows us to widen that path in the segment between House and Frida Kahlo, which would then allow us to use the widened sidewalk for both bicycles and pedestrians. So if this portion can move forward and we can determine it feasible, then we can use the widened path under the prior item for bicycles all the way from the off-ramp to Frida Kahlo, which is the goal of the.
I swear I did read this memo. I think I needed to have that spelled out for me. So the intent of using the NTIP funds for the feasibility study would be to actually connect the bike path from Frida Kahlo Way all the way to essentially to the southbound ramp. Is that correct?
You're correct.
Off street.
Yeah, we're studying it because we have to go through the process of studying it, and then moving forward, the projects are not on the same timeline.
And then what about like the bicycle traffic like further east? Like would that still be on the street, or is the intent to like look at like I'm not sure if I'm following. Is the intent for that to like go further to the east, or would it just start at the southbound?
So what this current piece of work is to look at the feasibility of removing that retaining wall, because the retaining wall has provided a large obstacle complication to widening the sidewalk there, right? It's quite big. But there is a more holistic look at Ocean Avenue as a whole and getting bike and pedestrian traffic through there, and that was considered under the Ocean Avenue Mobility Action Plan. So there are other works, but this piece of work is to look at the wall.
I can just verify what Yana said. Rachel Hyatt with the Planning Division.
MTA wanted us to take this to show that we're trying to do more than just the off-ramp, so that it's not so fragmented. Even though it's still a short distance, it's a little bit more. Again, it's a study, but it's something that we committed to doing as part of our collaboration, and MTA has the more holistic.
Member Margarita.
Thank you for your presentation. I just had a quick question, and forgive me if I missed it. I keep on looking for it, and I didn't see it when I was reading through it. Do you have a list of the different community folks that you guys reached out to, so that there could be like a mix, like, including the elderly and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, we have an extensive list, and we can provide it to you. I cannot list everyone off the top of my head, but I was personally at many of the meetings and met a lot of people, and there was a good mix of people from all ages, and it was actually a really great experience. And so I'm glad you recommended it, but we can provide the list.
Okay, thank you. And then never gonna do this to me. I'm not sleeping, but is there any lights there or no? Because I can see Member Daniel's concern. Like, it just looks almost only bike friendly and car friendly, but not necessarily pedestrian friendly. Like I'm looking, okay, there's no like lights it's just for traffic, but you know, for the bikes and the cars, but not necessarily the pedestrians, or am I missing something?
So because we're just at the feasibility study, we are looking to widen up, in the range of 14, 16 feet. This is the total width of a multi-use path that can accommodate both pedestrians and bicyclists. A future design would certainly include the appropriate level of lighting for pedestrians and bicyclists. There's codes to what that should be, but at this feasibility point, we're not looking at the lighting specifically, but it's a good comment, and there will be lighting.
I'm going to maybe speak out of turn, but I believe there's light. If you're asking about street lighting or you're asking about traffic, okay. I don't think that there was going to consider for this particular study, but
Please use your mics. Thank you.
Yeah, but just
so this does not include traffic signal lights that that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. So again, piggybacking on Member Daniel's concern for pedestrians, right? A little concerning still.
But again, there is a traffic analysis that's part of the study, so it did come out of the study, but wasn't specifically something that is definitely a part of the scope of work, but it could be a result of the study.
Got it. So it doesn't mean that, although it's not there right now, but after community input and after the study is completed, then might be the outcome is going to be that this area needs traffic lighting.
Yes,
correct?
Yes, that could be a possibility.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Member Ford?
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so we've spent a lot of money on retaining walls for bike lanes on Treasure Island. I'm more and more regretting my early votes again, for. And part of what sort of generated that momentum is you do a study and you're like, we're going to have mobility on Treasure Island and it's going to require a multi-use path. And then suddenly we're spending $50 million on a bike lane on Treasure Island. And I'm looking at this retaining wall and it is huge. And I'm wondering, like, is there $230,000 in the context of this committee is not that much money, but I'm wondering, like, are we trying to make square what is actually a circle? Like, this is a very space-constrained location, just like looking at the map. That is a huge retaining wall. Is there a maintenance issue with the retaining wall that, like, it needs rebuilding anyway because it's not seismically sound or something? Or are we just doing this to make bicyclists feel heard? Because that's not quite enough reason for me to say this is a project that we should be putting a ton of money per square foot onto.
Frankly, the outcome of that would be something we could determine as part of the study. They're going to look, it's a very old retaining wall, and they're going to look into the as-built and to the geotechnical condition of it. At this time, I cannot speak to its seismic viability, but the results of the study could.
Member Milford-Rosales?
So I'm very excited about the potential of this project, especially if with other upcoming projects that would continue on Ocean Avenue to make for a good, safe bike connection south of Twin Peaks, which there isn't really one of those right now. But I think as many other members have asked, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I'm not really get into details I'm not sure about that's going to be answered with this study. Would it be possible for us to get an update at some point on this item that's not after everything's been done and it's ready for approval, but where we can see the results of the studies and have a better idea of of feedback that we can provide before it's too late in the process?
Absolutely. That is one of the one of the proposals of this work is that we will do a midway report and seek your feedback. So we will do that, and
All right.
I would guess in the June timeframe. I'm just guessing it will be about that far.
All right. Thank you very much. That is that's wonderful. The other thing I would just like to add on, kind of adding November to Daniel's comment. When I'm biking along like the Embarcadero or areas like that, there are a lot of places where there's a bike lane for the Embarcadero that's very poor condition, and the sidewalk's supposed to be a multi-use path, but it's not really good to have. With the number of pedestrians and cyclists, we really shouldn't be mixing it all in that area. And I know there's a lot of pedestrian use right now on this sidewalk. So I guess I'd just like to see, as part of that update, like how do we prevent creating a situation where we're shoving too many cyclists that are going at a meaningfully different speed into the same space as pedestrians? Just because, I mean, with BART right there, so many people are taking the train and walking to and from class there. So I'd just like to see what all we can do to prevent recreating some of the other areas in the city that are theoretically great, but in practice, just the overall volume of people makes sharing impractical.
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons for looking at the traffic, which can be a misleading term that just means vehicles, and I've referred to it as usage. In some of the things, it's for pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles, also, you know, buses, all the forms of movement.
Great. I thought you had said that earlier, but just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that term correctly. Thank you so much.
Member Ortega?
Yes, I also wanted to echo Vice Chair Daniels and Member Milford Rosales. When I heard that this is going to be a multimodal path, I used to work right next to the Embarcadero, and I constantly was worried I was going to get hit by a bike or a scooter, even though there was a bike lane literally next. And so I guess one of the things that I would ask is, in this study, if you not only look at just a multimodal path, but you look at ways of creating separation between the pedestrians and the bicyclists. I think that if that was incorporated in the study and included, and I'm asking now so that way I can not ask you 50% of the way through your work, I would really appreciate that, because I think pedestrian safety is a big concern. And one of the comments that I got a lot when I told people I was on this was, oh my gosh, the bicyclist almost ran me over today. And I understand that at some point, you know, you cannot lead a horse to water, or you can't make it drink. Like, people will always bike on the sidewalk, even if they shouldn't, even if there are other options. And I know a lot of bicyclists who are very opposed to that because it gives bicyclists a bad name. But like, a multimodal path is literally asking for it. And so I would appreciate just not just one option if you want to extend the bike path in this study. And then the other thing is, when you talk about the geological concerns or the seismic concerns with that retaining wall, I think this is more of an open-ended question that I'd be willing to take offline. What happens if you find out that wall is like actually in need of major repair? Like, I don't know. Yeah, like I guess, yeah, like what's the wall? Like, who owns it? Like, you can answer this later. You can answer this during the study presentation. That's fine. But like, if you find out that there's like an actual major issue with this wall, I'm assuming it's there for a reason. I don't know. I didn't build it, but I would like there to be a clear understanding of that as well when it's presented again later. Thank you.
Member Milford Rosales, okay. Any Member Margarita?
Thank you so much again. I promised last time. So if I know that, thank you in advance for offering the list of the community folks that are going to and have been a part of those meetings. And two, can you provide us with that list when the meetings are? Because I do know of people that have been wanting to be a part of those meetings and they have no idea where to go or how. And so if you can share it with us, and maybe all of us can share with those other community members as well.
And I'll just echo other members' feedback about affordances for bicyclists and pedestrians. I think generally neither of them really want to be sharing space with each other, and creating a conflict point is just pitting them against each other, and I think there is space for both here, so appreciate your work on this study. Any other questions or comments before we go to public comment? Any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment for this item.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 10? Moved by Member Milford Rosales. Seconded by Member Kim. Madam Clerk, could we please get a roll call vote? Sure, we could take this same house, same call without objection. Okay, great. The item is approved. Thank you so much for all your presentations. We'll move on to item 11, adopt a motion of support to approve the 2025 San Francisco Congestion Management Program. And this will be delivered by Principal Transportation Modeler Drew Cooper. Welcome, Mr. Cooper. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. My name is Drew Cooper. I'm here to present the 2025 Congestion Management Program. This is a document that we prepare every 2 years as part of our role as a congestion management agency. What this report does is we collect a bunch of data to monitor and report on the performance of the transportation through a multimodal lens, so looking at traffic, transit, bicycle, ped, and other modes. We also document activities that we participate in to manage congestion in the city. So just a quick overview. A lot has happened in the last years. There was a lot of really rapid change following the kind of COVID era, and that has started to stabilize over the last 2 years. Arterial speeds have declined. Roadway travel time reliability on freeways has gotten worse. It's interestingly improved slightly on local arterials. While roadway speeds have gotten worse, transit speeds have actually remained, which is good. And transit ridership has continued to recover, although remains pretty far below pre-pandemic levels. Coverage of the transportation system has improved. Micro-mobility usage through SFMTA's shared bike and scooter programs has actually more than doubled within the last year. And then on the safety side, there have been 42 fatal collisions. Sure. I'm not going to repeat because future slides will kind of reiterate some of this stuff. My apologies. But just to, but the last point, though, is there were 42 fatal collisions, which is high, and there has been an increasing trend for the last 7 years. So these are the metrics we're going to walk through. Mode share. In the pink, you'll see kind of driving alone, low occupancy carpools, so carpools with 2 people, and TNCs, that's in the pink. Blue modes, which are kind of policy preferred modes, are transit biking, walking, and high occupancy carpools, so that makes up about 56% of trips to, from, and within San Francisco. Here we're looking at transit speeds. So again, here we transit speeds and traffic speeds. Traffic speeds, we see these declining on freeways, on local arterials, in the morning and in the evening. Transit speeds, however, over the last couple of years have remained flat. The one exception to this is transit speeds in the downtown core in the evening, which have gotten slower. Here we see auto to transit speed ratio, which is a measure of what the transit experience is like relative to the driving experience. So as a citywide average, this ratio is 1.8, which means that taking transit is roughly 80% slower than driving. That's a citywide average. There's a lot of variability across the city. And this shows that ratio is actually kind of lower, meaning transit is kind of more competitive in the core of the city and higher the further out you go from the core of the city. This snapshot is from our congestion dashboard. We update this monthly, and it shows traffic speeds throughout the city and over time. It shows, perhaps unsurprisingly, that traffic congestion is concentrated on freeways and in the downtown core and kind of radiates out along key arterials. There's, of course, congestion in other parts of the city, but it's overall less and a little bit more varied. These slides are showing injury and fatal collision statistics. Injury collisions have been flat over the last few reporting cycles. They remain lower generally than pre-COVID. And the kind of distributions of who is involved has remained somewhat similar. So in the blues, these are collisions that involve vehicles only. The kind of purple is collisions that involve bicycles also, and the pink are collisions that involve pedestrians. On the right-hand side, you'll see that there's been this increasing trend in fatal collisions that I referred to earlier. It's not uniform, but it's very clearly trending upward. This slide tells us a little bit about the kind of uneven recovery of transit. So in the kind of reddish, orangish at the top, that's Muni, which has recovered to, as of the spring, which is what this is showing, 72% of pre-COVID ridership. It's actually a little bit higher than that now. I believe the latest figure was 77%. But BART and Caltrain remain pretty far below. BART is still under half of their pre-COVID ridership. Here we see micromobility. So this is specifically usage of the programs that are permitted through SFMTA, the shared scooter and the shared bike programs. Monthly average usage of these programs roughly doubled in the last year. Pretty big increase. These show trends on the left, Bay Bridge volumes, and on the right, San Mateo County Line crossing volumes. Before the pandemic, these had actually been kind of on a slight downward trend in the peak periods. A big dip during the pandemic and then a rebound, and then things kind of leveling off. But since about 2022, there's been a kind of continuing slight, not significant, downward trend in Bay Bridge crossings. And at the San Mateo County Line, you see a not exactly the same, but a kind of similar pattern. And then finally, as a congestion management agency, we undertake a lot of activities in the planning, funding, project delivery, and policy research realms to help manage congestion and multimodal transportation system performance. And these are some examples of those activities. I should acknowledge my colleague Chun-Ho Chow, who actually did the vast majority of this work. I should have acknowledged him up front, so thank you, Chun-Ho. Fortunately, he couldn't be here tonight to present himself, but happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ortega.
Oh, knocking everything over. I just have a comment. I kind of want this on the record. We talked about, and you mentioned like a key finding is our greater share of San Francisco residents live within a 5-minute walk of a frequent Muni service, a bus every 5 minutes or less. I just want to call out that in the report, I think it was from 20% to 27%. And I kind of feel like that's terrible, like awful. I feel like when we talk about what we want transit to be, and when I think about transit in other great metropolitan cities, I can grab a subway in every 5 minutes, and I'm not really thinking about it when I went around New York or when I went around Tokyo. I didn't really worry. There's going to be a train. It'd show up. I constantly have that worry on like whether or not my train is going to show up and I'm going to be late for work. And so while I appreciate that we are starting to improve access, I feel like there's pride in that, and I think that there should be. We are making it better, but that isn't a statistic that I feel like we should be proud of. We should be trying to push it so that all of the transit systems make it much, much easier for everyone to get around. Like it needs to be something cataclysmic is happening that I'm not trying to take the bus, not like I'm planning my day around trying to take the bus, which has been what has been happening recently. And like I think that is a bit of a philosophy that I have, but I feel like it's one of the reasons I joined, which is especially areas outside of the downtown core, we should make sure that transit is as easy and useful to them and useful to people that aren't just trying to get downtown. And this study just highlights how unequal that is in this city to me. And so that is my comment. I think that the only sort of question I have is, this seems to be like a really big average. I think one of the things that I would be curious about, if you could potentially provide, you have average weekday, and one of the things that I would be curious to know is if you have average weekday of like a Tuesday versus a Friday. One of the things I think a lot of my colleagues and I can notice is pandemic really made it so that not everyone was going to work on like Friday or Monday, but everyone's going to work on like Tuesday. And so I'd just be curious to see sort of if you could have like that type of it doesn't need to be like every Friday, like that type of breakdown, if that type of breakdown exists, or if that's something that can be provided at a later time.
You're right to point out that we don't include that in the report. It is doable, and it is something I think that we are going to consider doing differently in the future. I suspect that exactly what you're talking about is actually reflected in one of the statistics, which looks at roadway travel time variability, which is that increases when you have days that are less congested and days that are more congested. And so I do think that is likely a driving cause behind why that not so much higher.
Yeah, I would believe it. And I guess it's more from a curiosity perspective, but I would really appreciate that type of information, because I think that the question I'm curious about is if what's actually happening is that the days where there are less people, it's actually dampening the numbers of the days that are heavier. Like I had to drive today at 11 o'clock on Cesar Chavez, and I was just like bumper to bumper traffic, basically until it stopped becoming a major thoroughfare road in Noe and the 101. It was just like, and it was 11 a.m. It wasn't even a peak hour for traffic. And so I think I'm just curious, like if we take out like certain weekdays, if it's actually showing a slightly different trend. Because you're averaging in days that will have less. You're getting that variability, and you're showing that you have that variability. So I think it's there. I'm just curious. And that's like later, it's not like a criticism. I think like I understand why the study was written this way. It makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious about that aspect.
I do want to make one quick clarification, which is that the roadway performance are derived from Tuesday through Thursday data. So they do already exclude Monday and Friday, but there still may be variability, surely more variability in there now than there used to be. Or I would.
Oh, great, thanks.
Member Bars?
Thank you, Director Cooper. I want to plus one what Member Ortega said. I do just love going after Member Ortega. I mean that very sincerely. I'm not kidding. Maybe I'll soften the language slightly, but in that slide 18 in the presentation where it talked about percent of population with community service within a 5-minute walk, their residents, weekday PM period, PM peak, and that about 27% of the population live within easy distance to a 5-minute frequency bus. I'm not sure I would say I think it's awful, but I would say I don't think that's what many of us here are aspiring to. And I'm directing this in particular because I realize that Director Hyatt is in the room, which is that, because like where I would want to see those options for something bolder and understand the trade-offs to get to something bolder would be coming in the plan. And so I'm just like, that's something I just want to go on the record by saying, like, I think it's an improvement. I'm happy to see it's up from 20% to 27% in 2025. I think that's going in the right direction, but it doesn't feel like a world-class transit to me. So I want to essentially echo what I heard Member Ortega say. I have two questions. One is I'm really fascinated about slide 12 in the growth in 2024 to 2025 of micromobility trips, which granted still make up a very small percentage of our total trips. Appreciate that. But is there a hypothesis to explain that explosion in growth?
I don't have one.
Okay. Great, thanks. Very curious. It's a big jump. And then I want to make sure I'm interpreting the ratio slide correctly. So that is, yeah, that's the one, auto transit speed ratio. Yes, so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this. So what this is saying is, thank you. So if it's green, then transit is more competitive with autos on that corridor. And if it's yellow to red, it's less competitive. Is that correct?
In all of these cases, transit is lower than auto, but in a relative sense, that's correct. So transit is relatively more competitive on the green segments than on the red segments. Okay, so where it shows, like where we see the Van Ness corridor, that's presumably the Van Ness BRT, and the fact that those vehicles are going more or less at the speed of train, right? Correct. Okay, got it. It's 1 to 1.5 times. Is that what it's saying? It's saying that the travel time is 1 to 1.5 times that of if you were driving in a car on that corridor? That's exactly right. Okay, thank you. So just given the fact, and then this is, of course, I live in District 7. I am looking out to my part of the city where I'm seeing a fair amount of yellow and orange, and just thinking like there's got to be room for improvement there. And like we're going to put a lot of growth on the west side of the city, as I understand it. Just like if the bus or the train is 2 times the travel time of a car, people are going to choose to drive again and again and again. So again, that's not a comment for you, Director Cooper, but again, your colleague is sitting behind you. So I just want to emphasize that this is something that I personally am very keen to see in plans.
Member Kim?
Thank you, Chair. I have the same question, those map. Tell me this data collected, when is the time period? Is it 2025 or 2024?
Most of this data comes from the spring of 2025. There are some exceptions to that. For example, all of the collision data reflects an entire year's worth of data up through 2024 because that's the most recent available. Micromobility data, for example, that runs all the way up until last month. But most of the key metrics are reported from 2025 in April and May.
Yeah, the reason I ask, Gary Boulevard has some changes. Until 2023, we don't have bus-only lane, certain part, especially Park Presidio to 28, and 2023, October, bus-only lane installed. And then 2024, we had bus-only lane, but 2025, the PUC construction started. So even maybe, I guess, you cannot measure proper data because construction is everywhere digging out. So that's what I'm asking. This data is probably 2024.
This data is from 2025.
25. Okay. Yeah. And then I have a couple of other questions. In your main report, I don't understand some of the terminology. So could you explain what is the priority production area? There's certain languages like, and then if there's a lot of word infill opportunity zones. Could you explain what it this means?
Sure. So I'm going to invite Director Hyatt perhaps to comment on priority production areas if you can. But infill opportunity zones are a part of the legislation that the rules for writing a CMP, congestion management program, where it basically sets some parameters on urban typology and says in these types of areas, it's okay to prioritize alternative modes of transportation to automobiles, and therefore you have roadway segments that fall below a certain level of performance. That's okay. I see Chun Ho Chow's come on camera, so perhaps he could actually have a slightly better answer than me.
Yes, I'm Chun Ho Chow, Transportation Modeler. Thank you for your question, Member Kim. As you may recall, in the previous cycle in 2023, I talked about updating the infill opportunity zone. So this zone is based on, as Director Cooper mentioned, it's based on the availability of transit stops. And in this zone, if a roadway is still very slow at level service F, no deficiency planning is needed to be done. Whereas if a roadway outside of the zone is at LOSF, then San Francisco would need to do deficiency planning. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so understanding this is the area we need to improving transportation with alternative modes rather than car. Am I understanding correct?
It is more of a reflection of the current good level of transit service. So it is set based on the current level of service, transit service. And it's a certain radius around each of these high frequency stops that are served by transit.
If I may, it's a way of the state trying to incentivize growth to occur in places where there's already a high level of transit.
Yeah, but there's a map almost cover whole San Francisco. So I'm curious, as we know, other members we're talking about, especially west side, there's a lot of big holes, especially our next item is District 4 shuttle study. It shows exactly where is a big holes. I saw the concept. I like the concept of walk shed. So obviously shows a lot. There's a big holes. So people needed to walk to the transit area. Normally bus stop. So we always said, leg of first and last mile service, especially west side. But it is a infill opportunity zone. Looks like everywhere. So I'm questioning. If we find the way to improve, we need to know where is the problem. But somehow it doesn't show where's the problem. That's my first question. And then the second one is, so huge report. I really appreciate the hard work. And is there any suggestion to MTA, especially the Muni service? Maybe this time or in the future, we can recommend realign the route. So you have a comprehensive study, so maybe, BART, Caltrain, we cannot change the route, but Muni, we can do it. So, for example, Alameda County, they announced they realigned their the bus service, and then they bragging, there's a lot of save and achieve the efficiency. So, is there any recommendation to MTA from this report?
This report does not provide route planning recommendations or other recommendations, really. Its purpose is to monitor and report on conditions. That said, this information does inform our own planning exercises, and that planning work can generate those types of recommendations.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Daniels.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is from the 5.5 PDM policies, requirements, and programs. There's a reference to programs for existing development, and it talks about on-street car sharing pilot program. Is there more information, or was this just looking over it? Because I love those programs, but they're all gone. Like, there's no Gig, no Zipcar, no Turo. I can't, where are they? Are they coming back? Thank you. Thank you.
I cannot answer that question. I'm sorry.
Thanks anyway.
Member Ford.
Thank you. I was wondering about the two basic things. One, how do you methodology understand trips within San Francisco to attribute like walk share trips? And is this commute trips or is it all trips? And what constitutes a trip? I took my trash out with a walking. Is that a trip? So yeah, I was just wondering on particularly as you look at the lower, well, really active transit, like the walk, the bike, and the scooter, like when do you consider it a trip, and how do you even keep track of them if they're not on the rental fleet?
That's a good question. It's one that's near and dear to my heart, so thank you. The way that we measure it is through collecting what we call travel diary surveys. The one that was used in this report was collected in 2023. It's a regional effort. It's a survey that's conducted in partnership with MTC and the Santa Clara VTA. And what we do is we recruit people using a stratified random address-based sampling approach. Happy to go more on and on about that if desired. But at the end of the day, what people do is they are recruited into participating in the survey. We pay them incentive to participate. They download an app on their phone, and that app identifies when they, have left their home and traveled to another location, and then it prompts them for information about what they did. So why they made that trip, what mode they used to make that trip, what members of the family or friends or other people who are traveling with them, all kinds of data. And what we get at the end of the day is a pretty big, pretty rich and detailed data set of travel behavior that spans, for most people, 7 days worth of travel.
Perfect. Thank you. I've actually taken that survey, and now I know where it went. Your incentive bought my jeans. Okay, then that gets to the coverage question, which is that, am I correct that the access to 5-minute transit within a 5-minute walk is access to any transit, not necessarily transit going in multiple directions?
That's right. I would invite Mr. Chow to speak again if I misstate anything. But this is a purely service-based metric, and so it's measuring at a stop level if there is any service at a 5-minute frequency. I'm not sensitive to like where it's going or if it's going in multiple directions or anything like that.
Hold on, wait.
Yeah.
5-minute frequency? Like, I'm a 5-minute walk for the N Judah stop, but I can tell you that does not come every 5 minutes, for sure. But I would, oh wait, I'm a 10-minute headway on this map, so they're accurate. Thank you.
I think Director Cooper has answered it pretty well. So one thing to note is that it's based on published service timetables, so it might not be a reflection of what is actually happening when transit is running.
Okay, great. And then the ratio of auto time to transit time, does that take into account the waiting time based off of these service levels on the transit?
It does not take into account the time that you as a passenger would spend waiting for a bus, but it does account for dwell time. So like the time that a bus spends stopped at.
I just want to read in the record, I think we still have a lot to do for transit as a competitive mode, and that we should be constantly looking at how we do that so that people choose it, not because they have to, but because they want to, because it's the best way to get around.
Member Milford Rosales.
So this is a bit of just a data nerd question that I don't know if it's viable or not, but looking at the map that has the muni coverage by service frequency and also the table of coverage by service frequency. I know that there are, based on planned timetables, there are places like where I live where I have 4 different routes, 3 of which start and end like within a 5-minute walk of my apartment, that are generally averaging 10-minute frequencies, but based on the planned times online, they're staggered such that there should be stuff leaving like every 3 minutes from where I'm at. In practice, they never stagger at all, even though it's the beginning of the route and there's not like a reason for delays. So if I miss one of them, I have to wait. I've missed all of them, and I have to wait 10 minutes outright. I'm just curious if this is is this something that is measured that I can look at just to see if there are metrics on how and why that comes to be, and whether it's normal to try and strategize with the 30 and 45 to try and stagger them, or if it's more by design that they tend to be in sync.
So you're getting at a couple of different things. One is a service design question, and one is a scheduled service versus delivered service question. And speak to the latter, which is we don't include metrics that speak directly to the issue that you're talking about. But SFMTA does actually produce dashboards on on-time performance. I believe, and no, please correct me if I'm wrong, that we do link to those in this report, but we'd be happy to point you to them.
That's great. And I guess out of to confirm, I guess on the first point, like is when you're measuring a specific stop, is this for the frequency of a line at that stop, or for the stops that share multiple lines? Does it take the theoretical potential, like so if the 30 and the 45 share a stop and they're operating at 10-minute frequencies, on this, does that show as a 10-minute frequency, or if in the schedule they're supposed to be staggered, does that show as a 5-minute frequency?
Mr. Chow, could you answer this one?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for the question. I believe it's per line, but I can get back to you by email after I check how it's actually implemented.
Thank you very much. That would be awesome.
Member Margarita?
Thank you, Director Cooper, for all the information. I have like comments all over the map. So the shared bikes and scooter trips, that's a huge increase in 1 year, 400,000 to 700,000. Like, whoa, right? And it makes sense why folks are like, oh my gosh, I was almost hit by a bicycle or a scooter. And so that's like concerning, because right now we're just 1 year in, and I mean, it makes total sense, right? In the sense of the cost. People need to get to work, and it's cost effective to do the scooter or the bike, but now there's like a whole bunch, and it's kind of cool, and so therefore more people are doing it, and it's cost effective. So anyways, I think it's really time to think outside of the box. And I remember, and I looked it up, so back in May 22nd, 2013, Supervisors John Avalos, Scott Wiener, well, at the time, Supervisor Scott Wiener, and also Supervisor Eric Moore, went with a delegation to Mexico City to look at their transportation and what they were doing with the, it's called the Mexico City's EcoBici bicycle share system and their Metrobus rapid transit BRT system. And so I was wondering if there's any possibility for us to, because they went with like 17 other folks from the community, including nonprofits and San Francisco government employees and representatives and blah, 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 and all of that for the purpose of looking at their sustainable transportation projects. And so I think we need to bank on what they learned, what was working for them, what wasn't working, because that's a huge city, right? And somehow they were able to like separate. And one of the things that is going on over there, if people might know and might not know, but they ended up over there because there's just such a huge population in comparison to us here. Like you might have, okay, Monday, you're the orange ticket. So on Monday, you're able to drive your car because you have the license to drive a car on a Monday. On Tuesday, you're able to ride your bicycle or the whatever this new, I mean, back then it didn't exist, but now scooter. Because I think we really need to look at how many people are getting them. And if in 1 year we just added 300,000, that's a huge jump. And I'm already seeing like the red flags or burgundy flags of concern for pedestrian safety. And so I don't know, can we learn from that trip that was sponsored by the Institute for Transportation Development and Policy with the support of the Rockefeller Foundation? I promise I do not work for them, but that's who did it. And so let's bank on that. Like, what did we learn from that? Because in 1 year, we just added 300,000 more. Like, if we just added 300,000 more cars to the street, I think we'd be concerned, right? So why wouldn't we be concerned if there's 300,000 more scooters and bicycles out there? And the number of trips, not the shared bikes and scooters trips, is just, okay, well, still, that's a lot. Okay, but in essence, it's a lot more out there. And even just this year, with having to add to that, in the city and county, well, we went from, a lot of folks working 2 to 3 days in the office to you're going to be in the office 5 days a week. So all of this combined, there's just a lot of, think about it as ants, right? If we just added all these ants out there, wouldn't you be concerned, or mice, or what? I just think let's jump on it and see what can we do to minimize, or what can we do to maximize safety for everyone, right? And what have we learned from the past studies, from all these trips taken in different places in the world? And was there a report that came out of these different studies, more than 12 years ago? What did we learn from it? I know there was positives and negatives. No city is perfect, but I think we need to bank on that. And I'm also going to jump on what Rosales, Member Rosales said. I'm right next to the 44. The 44 does not pass every 5 minutes. I love the 44, but it's gotten better though, for sure. From back in the day, ooh, yes, it has gotten better, but we still have some improvements. But I just think we need to look at pedestrian safety, and let's learn from the studies that have occurred in the past, and why not have it be where we're supporting people taking, muni, and have it be limited, where yes, okay, you can drive your car on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you've got to figure out how you get around the city without a car. Maybe it's muni, maybe it's a scooter, maybe it's a bicycle. And same thing with the bicycle and scooter folks. We've got to have a control over it, because it is a little dangerous out there, much more than before. And I don't know, am I the only one? Yes, exactly. So, let's continue to make San Francisco a beautiful city and a safe city for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll try to keep my points real brief. So first, on the auto transit speed ratio map you shared, it's great data. I love it. Is there a reason why the data is so spotty geographically? Are these just the only roads where you have both vehicle speed data and transit speed data?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. I'm a little concerned about the lack of any data about the southeast corner of the city or most of the Sunset District. I know these are areas that often feel neglected by the MTA, and I would guess that the numbers the colors are pretty orange or red there. Generally, the fact that, district, the outer part of District 1, District 4, the southwest part of District 7, the numbers are really not good. And it's hard to, go to those folks and, ask for more transit funding, which we're going to be doing next year. So I think feedback maybe for the Transportation Authority Board. I don't know if this is a good way to pass that along, but this item feels the most relevant, I think, to this feedback. We're going through a process right now to determine a local measure for next year for Muni. The regional measure is locked, but the local measure, we still have an opportunity to, as a transportation authority, advocate that we want to see increased investment in transit service and not be, you know, asking people to make do or feel like their you know, car infrastructure is being eroded while not also offering better transit service. So I'd really love to see the Transportation Authority advocate for like using this moment to say we need better. We can't keep doing what we're doing right now. We can't ask people to rely on service that is 80% worse than on average than car service. So I'd just like to pass that feedback along. I think that's it, but thank you so much for the study. It's really wonderful data and appreciate the presentation. Member Margarita, do you have another comment?
Now I'm being selfish. Quick question. With regards to, because I used to ride the 91L all the time, what do you know what how long it takes now for wait times for the 91L? That's the bus that is ridden at night. I used to work nights for a long time. But so yeah, I was just wondering if it's 5 minutes right now.
I don't know the answer offhand, but is your question is about what is the service headway?
30 minutes. Okay. I was just wondering for my own selfish reasons. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think overnight service would be a great piece of data to keep track of as well. Yeah, I think we all know overnight service is really hard to rely on here. Okay. If there are no other questions or comments from members, is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Edward Mason. Regarding the program, does it consider commuter buses? Are they considered as rideshare, or, you know, I didn't see anything in there. And considering the number of people that quote unquote ride that, I was wondering if there was any way of keeping track of that. Pass-through traffic that's on the freeway all the time. Do we have any idea where they're coming from and going to, but not entering San Francisco, but just passing through the traffic? And what do we know about their motivation? And would there be any opportunity for a regional transit system to move these people? And are we at a level of congestion or below a level of congestion where we would not impose a congestion management fee? The argument in New York City is, well, you know, they wanted to have it, and another faction said no, but they did determine that there was a reduction in the amount of congestion in New York City. And when we have a spare the air day, does traffic congestion go down, or is it just totally ignored? At least my listening to KCBS, it's ignored. You know, on a spare the air day, it's just as congested as it is on any other day. So how do we change behavior in those respects? So, but the commuter buses I'm really interested in regarding how are they accounted for? Because I see a lot of commuter buses. There's a few, but there's a lot of these big buses running not at capacity. And as a consequence, they're creating a lot of congestion.
Thank you for your comment.
Especially when you're on narrow neighborhood streets. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one remote public comment. Griffin, go ahead. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Awesome. Thanks, CSC again. I'm back. I did want to call the goose egg out in the room and state that in slide number 6, and I know this dates back to 2023, but I believe it's roughly the same in terms of percentage of trips within and to and from San Francisco. 2.4% combined bike share and bikes. Yet we're consistently seeing safety improvement projects that include bike infrastructure. Safety improvement and bike infrastructure are two different things. Yeah, let's continue painting crosswalks. Let's continue putting in flash beacons for pedestrians to see. But 2.5%, not even 2.5% of all trips in 2023 to and from San Francisco were with bikes. Yet you see 27.1, 15, roughly 50% is by driving. A perfect example of feeling neglected, I believe, right now is the Bayview Pathway project. D10 does not want bike infrastructure part of that project, yet SFMTA wants to run their agenda and put bike infrastructure there. Similarly to the Clarendon Quick Build project, the board just passed bike infrastructure as part of the quick build there. Why don't we come up with a study to better understand projection of how many cyclists would be using these lanes, these bike lanes, before just implementing and building them? Thanks so much.
Thank you, caller. There's no more remote public comment for this item.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 11? By Member Kim, seconded by Member Bars. Madam Clerk, could we please take a roll call vote?
Sorry about that. On the motion to approve item 11, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels.
Aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford.
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Imadadeen. Imadadeen, absent. Member Kim.
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine. Levine, absent. Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Move on to our last item, the District 4 Community Shuttle Study Update. This is an information item, and we have Principal Transportation Planner Jean-Paul Velez present this item. Welcome.
I'm just cognizant of the time, so do you jump pause? I think a 5-minute presentation. Is that okay, or do you want them to go faster, or pleasure of the committee?
I think that's okay, a 5-minute presentation, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, yeah, I'll have to rush. I think the presentation was a little, I'll share, but yeah, I think the presentation was scoped to be a tad longer, so you'll see me run through some slides, but I'll try to be both comprehensive and swift at the same time. Let me see, where's the presentation mode on? Because I'm not doing it right. I'm not getting.
And we were on.
Now you go present.
Yeah. I can go here. And take a moment. There you go. Okay. And then you can just use this to click it along, okay? Or you can use the.
No. Okay. Here we go. So thank you here to kind of share our work on the District 4 community shuttle, kind of gather your feedback. So quick background on this project. The origin of this study is the District 4 mobility study completed a couple of years ago that recommended piloting an on-demand shuttle to improve access to local destinations and reduce mode share in the district. So following that recommendation, at the time, Commissioner Gordor-Mar solicited the board to allocate funding for closer, like this, yes, funds from the Neighborhood Transportation Program to conduct this study. The study's objectives are to design an on-demand shuttle or microtransit service based on local needs and industry best practices, to develop a strategy for potential implementation informed by the public, and to analyze the business case, benefits, costs, and funding options for the service. A way of context and kind of get on the same page about what we're talking about here. An on-demand shuttle basically refers to a transit service that operates without a fixed route or a fixed schedule. Instead, customers request the service on demand, either by their phone or a call center, and they share rides with other customers traveling in a similar direction. So very much like what an Uber pool used to be, or a Lyft. I forget what they called it. So the first step in our process was to conduct a very thorough peer review effort. We first reviewed over 25 different microtransit services across the country through secondary information, and then identified 8 services that we thought were closer peers to what we were trying to implement in the case of the District 4 or study for District 4. And so for those studies, we conducted interviews and kind of did a much more deep dive into the data and their published reports. Here is a select number of findings, including the preferred service area, 5 to 7 square miles, to include key destinations and transit, I guess, and trip attractors within that service area. To think about these services more as a solution to coverage challenges rather than to kind of travel or to transport high ridership. We also found that most agencies started with small pilots before expanding their services. Typically, these projects are implemented through turnkey contracting. That's kind of the standard practice, although different agencies adjust that practice to their specific needs. Maybe this other element I think that's interesting is that there's kind of like already kind of consensus around this idea that the target level of service should be around 15-minute pickup times and then 10-minute travel times. That's found to be a good balance between prioritizing kind of high quality of service while kind of managing costs. So with those findings in mind, we analyzed the case of District 4 specifically. The first thing that we observed is that indeed the land use makeup of the district and the size match well with what we see from successful peers. If anything, District 4 has more density than the typical peers, so that would already kind of bode for a higher level of ridership. We looked in detail into the transit services in District 4, and this is kind of very aligned with some of the conversations that you were having before. And so what we saw there is that transit is not a very competitive option, even though the district theoretically has good coverage for, again, fixed route transit services. But once you try to make a local trip with using those services, then you start to see a lot of, again, that the service is not as competitive as folks would like. And this is particularly so for people with disabilities and seniors that perhaps cannot be accounted for the traditional quarter-mile shed, and instead they need more of a shorter walk to access a transit service. There's also a lot of transfers and whatnot. So there is one, and then similar also to the conversation that we were having before on the right, you see a comparison between the car travel time within the district versus the transit travel time within the district, and we see that basically for the whole of the district, the difference is 5 times. So 5 times or higher for traveling on transit versus traveling on your private car. So for all of these reasons, it does seem that an on-demand shuttle could be a good fit to address some of the challenges identified. We conducted a first round of outreach in the fall of 2023. Basically, we asked the community about kind of the service design features that they would want to see represented in the service, and beyond those features also what would be some of the key priorities for that. I'll skip some of the details of that process because of our time concerns. So this is the resulting service design that, again, is informed by A, those kind of best practices that we identified, and B, the community input that we gathered. So we see that the service as a whole, we covered the full of District 4, but then we are recommending also to add to the south at the Stonetown Galleria Mall, as well as FSSU. The service will operate from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. on the weekdays and 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekends. In terms of the trip experience, is very much as I was describing. You request the service through a smartphone app or through a multilingual call center. You get to wait 10 to 20 minutes at your home or whatever you please, and only walk to the nearest intersections once you can see through your app that the service is coming to pick you up rather soon. However, for seniors or people with disabilities, our recommendation is that those customers actually get door-to-door service. The actual trip experience in the vehicle, you just come in, pay your fare with a Clipper card or through this smartphone app, and travel within 15 to 25 minutes, sharing the service with other fellow travelers, and then arrive at your local destination, again, nearest intersection, and kind of walk to get there. We conducted a second round of outreach where we presented this design to the community. It received a great level of support. We also had some conversations about funding with the community that you'll see reflected in the next few slides. In terms of demand and cost estimates, we find our estimation is that the service would achieve about 300 passengers per weekday. Our estimation is that the costs would kind of be in a range between 2.5 to 3 million for the annual operating costs, and there's some service design elements that impact that difference, plus an additional implementation cost of around $600,000 for sort of like the startup costs. So if you use that demand projection and those cost projections, basically you're in the range of $25 to $30 per passenger trip. In terms of implementation strategy, given the cost of the service and some of the limited funding options, as well as the demand uncertainties, we kind of like recommend the best practice already to just launch this service as a pilot before making it any long-term commitments to it. So again, this pilot helps you kind of gauge actual demand, adjust the service better to community needs, and then assess the long-term viability of the service and its implementation. So here we have a kind of structure of how we think the service could be funded for its first original pilot run. So the sources would be a combination of revenues, both from fares and potential advertising on the service, plus a combination of grants, local funding, and business partnerships or sponsorships. So as you can see in the table that is presented below, revenues would actually be a very small share of the actual cost of running the service. And so for this example table, we're suggesting that the rest of the funding is distributed equally between the 3 different other sources. It is worth kind of signaling here that finding actually these 3 sources is proving to be challenging. And so, again, this is just a mock structure. And then if that pilot run is proven successful, then and there's a desire to continue the service long term, then the funding structure would see some changes. Again, we would still get revenue from fares and advertising, but then external grants would no longer be a source for funding the service, meaning that the local funding would need to cover a higher share of the costs. And then similarly, the sponsorships may continue, but that also means that we may need to cover some of that gap with District 4 community funding. So that could be in the form of additional business partnerships through the development of a business improvement district or a parking benefit district to cover for some of these costs, as well as potentially increasing the fares of the service, and that can have, I guess, public costs. So for next steps, we see that the ongoing West Network study will help assess the potential role of this District 4 shuttle alongside other mobility options for the district and the west side of the city. This was more of a kind of standalone focused on the District 4 and the service study. Other initiatives such as the ongoing Bayview Community Shuttle pilot will also kind of help guide the future of this kind of modality in the city, as well as the upcoming Treasure Island shuttle service that, again, is also going to be implemented in a short-term future. Our vision is to complete this report and bring it to the CAC in its final form and to the TA board at some point early next year. With that, I conclude.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Margarita?
Time. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, because I remember I used to take it because I'm a former Gator, SFSU. And so, so we used to have a shuttle, but then within the last, year, we eliminated the shuttle over there from like top of the hill, right around, not top of the hill, I'm sorry, I need my sleep. What is it called? Daly City BART. So we used to have the shuttle from Daly City BART to SFSU, and then that was eliminated, along with, breaking my heart, with the 26 Valencia. If you can just have a visual, raining, backpack, baby, stroller. San Francisco State is huge, going from one end of the university all the way to the other in the rain, and with all of that, baby bag, babies, backpack, stroller, all of that. Anyways, and it's not just because I love former Supervisor Gordon Moore, but I love this shuttle business, and I feel like it shouldn't just be District 4, it should be all over the city. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Kim?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Member Margarita. This is, we're waiting for it. So this is a good concept, and then maybe I'm curious how not only on demand, probably a pilot is successful, maybe you can plan like kind of a routine, not fix the route, but there's a concept. District 1 has multimodal study, similar study. We identified the mini district. So District 4 has like Irving, Tarabel, Judah, and Stonestown, and then SF University. So that's the main spot people heading to, and also between them. Someone who, the Tarabel, they go to Stonestown. So there's the mini district. So if you connect those between mini district to the residents, then it'll be cover a lot of missing coverage from the existing service. So I'm really exciting to hear District 4, and then I'm a little disappointed. Last year, 2 years ago, we have District 1 multimodal study. I'm screaming we need a shuttle service between the mini districts somehow. we didn't have this solution there, but hopefully it's really successful, and then it applied to District 1 and other districts as well. And also, our chair mentioned next year when we ask Parliament to increase the tax to supporting transit, and we should provide, or and we promising something for good, right? Not only covering deficit. If we do use our taxpayers' money and then we have some better service, I think this is a good narrative. So hopefully you bring more detailed plan on the early next year. But I have a question. Do you think this fare, do you want to charge extra or just under existing clippers and monthly?
So we saw that the standard practice is to just charge your standard kind of local fare, and that makes the service equitable and more accessible to all. So that is the recommendation also that we got from the community in terms of the fare. I will say, though, that in our second round of outreach, as people started to identify that the service seemed to be a little bit of a premium service compared to other transit services, and also being aware of some of the funding challenges, that then that folks would be willing to pay a little more. I think so. That it's an interesting concept. But if you saw the chart that we present regards cost, then even if you double the fare, it's still a little bit kind of like of a marginal piece to solving the big funding question. So I think that we would have to do a deeper analysis to assess the cost and the benefits of that fare change. But it's something that has been circling this discussion for a while.
I'm recommending even you consider a little extra fee because it's premium service. I think now we have to consider, helping the transit budget. So we cannot abuse those systems, especially I feel like it'll be very popular. It's already proven service in Bayview and Bayview. So I'm just concerning, if a great service and then it's free, somebody has already monthly pass, and then I'm concerned, people abuse the system, so we cannot continue the service. So please consider the financial sustainability as well. Thank you.
Member Bars.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for staying so late. I'm sorry for my questions earlier. Sorry. But I think this is a neat proposal. I've experienced taking shuttles in these kinds of areas and had a good experience. My question is about so I have two questions. One is, I'm curious about what we found in either the Bayview pilot or maybe other pilots. How would people have made their trips if they didn't have the shuttle? I'm kind of curious. Do we know that?
Not for a fact, right? I think that in the Bayview, I'll speak more anecdotally for conversations with folks from the SFMTA. I think that the supply of transit kind of was limited, and so the assumption was that there was many trips being suppressed, and part of what this service was trying to address is that challenge. I think the theory for District 4 is, there is a share of that there's a fair amount of trips that may not happen because folks, especially elderly, don't have access to a car, and they find transit not very competitive. So I think that is part of the challenge. I think the other element that we hope we can at least make some inroads towards is mode shift. So, but to actually develop an assessment of that, that would be the theory to prove with a pilot. How are we changing kind of mobility patterns in the district with this type of service.
Okay, so the hypothesis is we have this solution that's well liked and it's employed elsewhere, and it's going to allow for people who maybe can't take a trip to take a trip, and also mode shift, as in like move from a single occupant vehicle to a shuttle. Is that those are like the hypotheses here?
Those are the goals. How those are balanced is perhaps what we can.
Okay. Very helpful. And then I am also curious, a little poking at this just a little bit, but like, what in terms of, so this is framed as a community shuttle study, as in we're going to look at a community shuttle and then decide if we think it's a good thing or a bad thing. Appreciate that's like the frame. But like, what would it have taken for the recommendation to be build more transit, as opposed to community shuttle is not appropriate?
Well, the study where some of that analysis was conducted was the D4 mobility study. This was the recommendation coming out. But sorry.
Yeah. I stand corrected. I'm sorry. It was you're right. Yeah. The D4 mobility study.
Yeah, and I guess perhaps so. Like, there's also the other bookend would be the ongoing West study, network study, that is also asking bigger questions about mobility. And so, as I was suggesting at the end of the presentation, this idea could be put forward and maybe compared to other alternatives of how to improve mobility in that part of the city, and whether it is considered a priority or not may have kind of like determine kind of what's going to happen with this matter or not.
Okay, so like maybe what you're suggesting is, so this, what we're looking at here, that was a recommendation from the D4 mobility study, right? And this is sort of like fleshing out what that recommendation could look like. But if we wanted to sort of like poke at, well, under what circumstances would maybe a new transit route or a new transit tunnel or something like that be better, we would look to the West Side network.
I understand that is the current, the best vehicle at the time to assess those questions. Yes.
Member Ford.
Hey, okay. This one of the things about the design of the study is it's like asking customers, would you like to use this thing? It's not asking them, are you using it tomorrow? And I guess I'm wondering, why did the Bayview pilot end? And how would you think about the learning curve? Like, I'm D4 rep, and I know that the transit options in my neighborhood are very downtown oriented. And I'm having a hard time picturing like what trip would be made better by this shuttle. Given the wait times at the beginning and the end, and in particular the uncertainty of whether it would be available for me to return home once I get stranded at Stonestown. And like, or once I've taken it to Stonestown, like, is it going to be there when I call it to pick me up, or is it going to have a bunch of other trips? And like, it's that like confidence that it's going to be there. A pilot is hard to establish that. And I guess how do we know that there would be 300 passenger trips a week? One, why did the Bayview pilot end? What was the challenge, and why would the D4 shuttle overcome the challenges that the Bayview shuttle found? And then finally, could you just ad hoc hop on the shuttle if you happen to see it at your location? And like, what about students? Like, could the Lowell High School kids order it up every day at 4:30 and like take it out to Ocean Beach and hang out? Like, how are we thinking about that?
I have 4 questions in there, so let me see if I can address them. The Bayview shuttle has not ended. It's ongoing, and I think it's very successful. And so that would be perhaps the first kind of point.
Sorry, John Paul, can you add, though, the funding issue with Bayview? Is this not ongoing?
Yeah, it has a grant to operate for 3 years. So it's the Bayview shuttle is in the 175, I believe, passengers per day area. So, yes. So maybe I'll jump to your demand question to kind of address that question. So what we see in D4 is a much more dense population. So the way that we assessed demand was looking at all of the different peers and looking at the land use context for those, again, various implementations, and then made a projection of demand for District 4 based on the local conditions. So, yeah, but again, it's a demand projection, it's a hypothesis, so that's no certainty, exact number. But in terms of getting stranded in stones down, you know, as long as you're requesting the service within the hours of operation, then you would get a pickup just along. So as long as it's at 10 p.m., before 10 p.m., and similarly 9 p.m. during the weekends, you would not get stranded. Any origin or destination in the service area is going to be available for pickup and drop-off within the service hours. And then finally, for students, we haven't really designed or kind of delved into that element, like where we want to set up an age kind of cap or floor, and how to manage that. That may be kind of next steps, but that's not so I don't have a definitive answer of how to manage some of those spikes. But I know from our peer study that that's something that the different operators are equipped to manage.
Me, wow, that Bayview shuttle is definitely still going. Just want to make sure everyone heard that. When you asked a question too, we remember Ford about the challenges, and while John Paul's still trying to get that information from MTA, obviously finding long-term funding to sustain it is a huge challenge, and that's one we're watching very closely. And the Bayview shuttle does have a little extra boost in the sense that it is operating in a disadvantaged community, and there's more grant opportunities for that. The pilot, D4 doesn't have that same.
Thank you so much for this study. Just a couple quick points of feedback. So I think this is a very worthwhile supplementary service, and I would love to see it implemented and continue in Bayview as well. I would still like to see like complementary, and I guess maybe this is for the West Side transportation study, but you know, how many trips would it generate? How much would it cost per passenger if we were to make the 18 run every 5 minutes? You know, how if we added a new route that goes to Stonestown that goes up more through like the center of the Sunset, how many trips would it generate? How much would it cost per passenger? Because this is a pretty high operating cost per trip relative to fixed route transit, and I do feel like there is a lot of like latent demand in the Sunset for more frequent transit, and I would just love to see us invest in both. Also, you know, we like this year smashed together a few transit routes that operated on less than $2.5 million per year, and like I mean, they had like 7,000 riders per day, and now they're combined, it's like 2,500 per day. So I just want, like, yeah, as like a agency holistically, I just would like to see us recommend options that are like investing in things that where we get the most like benefit for the dollar, given the funding situation we find ourselves in. So I think we have the money to do both, and it's just a matter of political will. So I really appreciate the study, and I'm supportive of it. Member Margarita?
No, I was rambling on because I haven't had any sleep. But again, going back to the question that I posed regarding the shuttle that was in D4 for like students, and it was eliminated because of lack of funding. And so are we looking at that? Because it was there before in a certain area over there, and now it's gone. Any comment on that?
I wasn't aware of that kind of service, so my apologies. I don't have much to comment, but maybe linking a couple of the comments from Member Kim and from Chair. You know, many operators like throughout the country have used these services both as a replacement for fixed routes that they find too expensive, or also the opposite, to build ridership to then have a fixed route. So I think that while the per passenger cost is higher, total cost may be lower, and that is precisely why it's used as a bridge solution. So so there's opportunities for assessing again. The tool can be applied in a range of ways. Margarita, I don't know about that service. I'll look into it.
Previously there, and it was just cut off with Maria last year. Was it last year?
We can look at it. I think it was SFSU run service, and we can confirm. Yep, Rachel's nodding.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments from members, is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Edward Mason, from the time that Supervisor Marr recommended this till now, there's been a lot of changes in the autonomous vehicles. And you read, well, Waymo's here. Yes, we know that. But Zook and all the others are coming online. Uber, Lyft, they're all here. And from my readings, Waymo loses money on their system. So my question is, well, let's have this system and let Waymo pay for it and lose the money as some arrangement that we can have here. That's how I look at this thing, that technology has taken over, and there's other parts of the country that are, exploring these types of things in smaller areas. And I think the autonomous vehicles, we're just going to have to, suck it up and, say they're here. They ain't going away. They're going to be here, and might as well use them to our advantage. And if we have to subsidize them, we can at least subsidize them at a lesser amount than what's being proposed right now at, $30 a trip. So let them share some of the burden because they've got the money. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one commenter. Griffin, go ahead.
Thank you all, and CAC. Yeah, the shuttle idea sounds lovely in theory. Like, I'd love to get picked up when I call for it within 5-10 minutes for $2.85 or less, or maybe even a little bit more. But the reality is $25 to $30 average cost per ride. That's 5 times more than the average cost per ride for a Muni passenger. The average cost per ride for per Muni passenger is, I think, $4.85 in that range. So again, as much as this sounds nice in theory, I think I agree with most that have spoken on the committee about this. I think there's got to be a little bit more investigation about, okay, if we do this study, like, what would be the long-term feasibility? Where would the money be coming from? I would certainly not want it to see this come from the revenue generated by MTA. And I would speak on behalf of all of our members at Connected SF, would feel the same way. For the $2.5 million, yeah, I think Kat brought up a good point. Could we run another route using a regular Muni route, or another Muni route for that amount, with maybe more reliable and consistent service? So yeah, it's just a glaring average cost per ride. And that really concerns myself, but I would confidently say that would concern all of our members at Connected SF, which is in the thousands. So I would think twice about the long-term feasibility before hopping into a study. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your comment, and there is no further comment for this item.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the presentation and for staying here so late with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time and your comments.
We'll move on to item 13, which is the introduction of new business. Do any CAC members have any new business? Member Bars.
Thank you. Inspired in part by Vice Chair Daniel's request last month, as well as Mr. Mason's comment, I would love to get an update on where we are in the study that I think we'd put on pause on congestion pricing in San Francisco. Could that come back, please? I see Director Hyatt left. He didn't want that question. There we go. Okay, the congestion pricing study is still on pause, so I can talk. It might be more of a refresher about what we did because we haven't been doing anything. Yeah, okay. If we could, I would take that refinement of my request. A refresher would be really lovely. Thank you. Yeah, and then I would also love to ask for, in that spirit, the freight study that we looked at last month could come back for some kind of informational item as well.
We'll just +1 the request for the congestion pricing information. That would be wonderful. If no other members have new business, is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment on new business?
Oh, there's no, sorry, there's no remote public comment for this item.
Great. We'll move on to item 14, public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment? Seeing any, is there any remote public comment?
Yes, we have 3 commenters for this. So we'll start with Roland. Go ahead. Are you there, Roland? Can you unmute?
Yeah. But I tried to unmute myself, but you didn't send me the unmute. Okay, all good now. You can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So, what I want to talk to is about a very unfortunate incident that's been going on with the TA board meeting for a while, with an individual that's quite frankly abusive, and I'm really don't understand how he got away with this for us as long as he did. I personally went to jail for 2 weeks for a lot less than that. But anyway, I'm wondering, moving forward, with regards to my personal situation, is we're going to continue to make an exception with people, with either seniors or mobility challenges moving forward. Because to me, it's very unfortunate if I'm no longer able to address the Board of Supervisors on regional issues like the DTX and other matters. So if the supervisors could take that into account when they come up with their resolution, that'd be very much appreciated. And thank you all for your service at this late hour. It's nearly 9:30. Good night.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Next we'll take Mike Swire. Sorry, Mike, go ahead. 2 minutes begins now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you for your service to the transportation needs of the Bay Area residents. I commend the City of San Francisco for prioritizing public transit and street safety over auto traffic. I especially appreciate the stance that SFCTA is taking against widening highways leading into the city. As you likely know, adding highway capacity is expensive, ineffective at reducing congestion, and environmentally destructive. I wanted to make sure, however, especially those who represent districts adjacent to the highway in the south, that you're aware that neighboring counties, i.e. San Mateo County, is considering widening Highway 101 that could still have this impact within the city of San Francisco's border. In the next year, San Mateo County will decide whether to widen US 101 right to the border of San Francisco. This is part of an initiative to install express lanes. Note, however, that express lanes are still possible by converting an existing lane instead of widening the highway from 4 to 5 lanes. Even if San Francisco decides not to widen 101 and 280 on its side of the border, a widening of 101 in San Mateo County feeding into San Francisco would have similar effects. 1,000 more cars driving into San Francisco every day and fewer people taking Caltrain and BART. As a result, San Francisco would see more traffic congestion, traffic violence on its streets, more financial difficulty for Caltrain and BART, increased air pollution, and greenhouse gas emissions. More air pollution can negatively impact air quality in various lower-income San Francisco neighborhoods, including the Mission, Portola, Bernal Heights, Bayview, Candlestick, and Visitation Valley. I encourage SFCTA to weigh in on the proposed widening of 101 adjacent to San Francisco and San Mateo County and make the public aware of the negative impacts that it might have on public health and safety in neighborhoods adjacent to the highway. I hope you speak to your respective supervisors about that. And one other plug for please moving this public comment up to the front of the meeting so we don't have to wait 3.5 hours into it. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your comments. Last comment, Griffin, go ahead and speak.
Thank you, and I will keep this one short. But as part of the Inner Sunset Transportation Study, our districts, Connected SF District 7 group, Sensible D7, as well as our D4 group, Sun D4, Sunset United Neighbors, urges the Inner Sunset Transportation Study project team to consider moving the protected bike lane from 7th Avenue to 5th Avenue. And here's the context as to why. Going west on Lincoln Way, Lincoln Way is a major thoroughfare, and those traveling west on Lincoln Way, turning left or trying to get over the hill to Laguna Honda or Forest Hill or West Portal, typically use 7th Ave as their main route. 5th Ave is a less car-centric street, yet it still connects to the Golden Gate Park, which is clearly a reason why you would want a bike lane there. Secondly, if there was a bike lane implemented on 7th Ave, that would remove the center turn lane going from southbound from 7th Avenue, meaning cars could not turn left onto Irving, and they already cannot turn left onto Judah. So it creates a major choke point. So I hope the committee here takes that into consideration and makes the recommendation to change the bike infrastructure from 7th to 5th Ave as part of the Inner Sunset Study. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your comment. There's no further, excuse me, public comment, remote public comment for this item.
Great, thank you so much. That puts us on item 15, which is adjournment. Thank you all. This meeting is now adjourned, and see you in 2026.